Oops. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Sanctuary, Starlings. That works out for me. Um. All right. What I was gonna say is I was afraid to take down my poster, right? But then I also realized okay. I know you guys can't really see it, but that is a painting my our sis made for me, my other bestie, and it's also a Six of Crows themed thing. And I was like, you know what? I'll just post all of the because there's also stickers that I have there as well that are Six of Crows and ones that I got off of I got them off Redbubble a long time ago. Like when I first read Six of Crows, and they've been on my wall ever since. It's also why I don't want to repaint my room. I have my stickers and posters, and I'm like, no, I'm never taking them down. um, but yeah, uh, I'm gonna just post all of my Six of Crows stuff in the Discord. So give me a moment. I spent like a few minutes taking pictures just now, so I'm gonna do that. And what? Okay. Sorry, I'm typing. There we go. All right. It's now in the Discord. So there, I did it live. Hopefully, y'all are back with your popcorn. Y'all have got prepared. What is this? Did I make this or you know what? I think I was bored in class one day and made this because it's clearly just a bookmark, but like the way I did it is funny. But yeah, we're gonna get started. Give me a moment. Mm. I also forgot to just straight up pull my own feet up because I should be watching it to make sure I'm not getting buffered. But yeah, we're in pajamas today. We're gonna be reading Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I'm so excited. I have my book upside down. Oops. But I love it because so the first book was all black and this one's all red. So I love it. All right. This one I unfortunately didn't get signed, but I think that day I really only took two. I think I took two books, which I think it was Six of Crows, and I took one that another author signed. Maybe I'll read that one for you guys one of these days. But look, oh, I should take a picture of this and put it in the chat as well. So this is like the map of the world. Fjerda. Oop, nope. Brain doesn't work. Fjerda, Ravka, Shuhan, and then there's the oops, Noviazem, the True Sea, Aimschin, and the colonies. Oh, and then you can see Kirch. Nope. Brain work with me. I'm never good at using like doing mirror stuff. Bad at that sort of thing. I always get confused. And then here's more like the this is the bigger map of like the um like Kirch. Well, especially like East Stave and stuff like that, West Stave, the ports. I know you can't really see them. I'll have to take pictures of these later though for you guys in the Discord. But yeah, Leigh Bardugo, Cricket Kingdom. And Six of Crows is only a duology, so this is the only other book. It's not a trilogy. To Holly and Sarah, who helped me build. Noah, who made sure the wall stayed standing. Joe, who kept me standing too. Oh, that's cute. And then of course here's the Grisha, the whole explanation of the different orders. All right, part 1, Forsaken. Hopefully y'all are prepared. Y'all got your popcorn. And I'm gonna try not to knock anything too badly. Sorry, I my lips get dry when we're doing this sometimes. And I already have my candle burning over here. All right. Chapter 1, Retvenko. Retvenko leaned against the bar and tucked his nose into his dirty shot glass. The whiskey had failed to warm him. Nothing could get you warm in this saints forsaken city. And there was no escaping the smell, the throat choking stew of bilge, clams, and wet stone that seemed to have soaked into his pores, as if he'd been steeping in the city's essence like the world's worst cup of tea. It was most noticeable in the barrel, even more so in a miserable dump like this one. A squat tavern wedged into the lower floor of one of the slum's grimmest apartment buildings. Its ceiling bowed by weather and shoddy construction, its beams blackened by soot from a fireplace that had long since ceased to function, the flue clogged by debris. The floor was covered in sawdust to soak up spilled lager, vomit, and whatever else the bar's patrons lost control of. Radvenko wondered how long it had been since the boards had been swept clean. He buried his nose more deeply in the glass, inhaling the sweet perfume of bad whiskey. It made his eyes water. Got popcorn water running on a zero soda energy drink day. Good boy, Eli. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. Also, I'm I'm like playfully I'm blaming you because I you joked that I wouldn't go to bed till 3 and I really didn't go to bed till after 3. And I just I was so hyped after I couldn't relax. Huh, you screwed me. No, just kidding. Love you, Eli. I love y'all. Y'all are the best. Thank you for supporting me, you guys. Okay. You're supposed to drink it, not snort it, said the barkeep with a laugh. Redvenko put his glass down and gazed at the man blearily. He was thick-necked and barrel-chested, a real bruiser. Redvenko had seen him toss more than one rowdy patron into the street, but it was hard to take him seriously dressed in the absurd fashion favored by the younger men of the barrel. A pink shirt with sleeves that looked fit to spill over huge biceps, a garish red and orange plaid waistcoat. He looked like a dandified soft-shell crab. Tell me, said Redvenko. His scritch wasn't good to begin with, and it was worse after a few drinks. Why does city smell so bad? Like old soup, like sink full of dishes. The barman laughed. That's just Ketterdam. You get used to it. Redvenko shook his head. He didn't want to get used to this city or its stink. His job with Councilman Hode had been dull, but at least his rooms had been dry and warm. As a treasured Grecian indenture, Radvenko had been kept in comfort, his belly full. He'd cursed Hode at the time, bored with his work shepherding the merchant's expensive cargo shipments across the sea, resenting the terms of his contract, the foolish bargain he'd made to get himself out of Ravka after the Civil War. But now? Now he couldn't help thinking of the Grisha workshop at Hode's house, the fire burning merrily in the grate, brown bread served with slabs of butter and thick cuts of ham. After Hode had died, the Kerch Merchant Council had let Ravenko take on sea voyages to pay his way out of the indenture. The money was terrible, but what other options did he have? He was a Grisha squalor in a hostile city with no skills but the gifts with which he'd been born. Another, the barman asked, gesturing at Redvenko's empty glass. Redvenko hesitated. He shouldn't waste his money. If he was smart with his pennies, he would only need to rent himself out for one more voyage, maybe two, and he'd have enough money to pay off his indenture and buy himself a ticket to Ravka in a third-class berth. That was all he needed. He was due on the docks in less than an hour. Storms had been predicted, so the crew would rely on Rebenko to master the air currents and guide the ship calmly to whatever port they needed to reach. He didn't know where, and he didn't care. The captain would call coordinates, Redvenko would fill the sails or calm the skies, and then he would collect his pay. But the winds hadn't picked up yet. Maybe he could sleep through the first part of the voyage. Redvenko tapped the bar and nodded. What was a man to do? He deserved some comfort in this world. I'm not errand boy, he muttered. What's that? The barman asked as he poured out another drink. Radvenko gave a dismissive wave. This person, this common lout, could never understand. He toiled away in obscurity, hoping for what? An extra coin in his pocket? A warm glance from a pretty girl? He knew nothing of glory in battle, what it was to be revered. You Ravkan? Through the muzzy blur the whiskey had created, Radvenko came alert. Why? No reason. You just sound Ravkan. Radvenko told himself to relax. Plenty of Ravkans came through Ketterdam looking for work. There was nothing on him that said Grisha. His cowardice filled him with disgust. At himself, the barman, the city. He wanted to sit and enjoy his drink. There was no one in the bar to jump him, and despite the barman's muscles, Radvenko knew he could handle him easily. But when you're Grisha, even staying still could mean courting trouble. There had been more rumors of disappearing in Ketterdam. There had been more rumors of disappearances in Ketterdam recently. Grisha vanishing from the street or their homes, possibly snapped up by slavers and sold to the highest bidder. Redvenko would not let that happen to him, not when he was so close to buying his way back to Ravka. He downed his whiskey, slammed a coin on the counter, and rose from the bar stool. He left no tip. A man could work for a living. Redvenko felt a little unsteady as he headed outside, and the moist stink of the air didn't help. He put his head down and set his feet toward Fourth Harbor, letting the walk clear his head. 2 more voyages, he repeated to himself. A few more weeks at sea, a few more months in the city. He'd find a way to make it bearable. He wondered if some of his old friends might be waiting for him in Ravka. The young king was said to be handing out pardons like penny candy, eager to rebuild the Second Army, the Grecian military that had been decimated by the war. Just 2 more trips, he said to no one, stamping his boots against the spring damp. How could it be this cold and wet this late in the year? Living in the city was like being trapped in the chilly armpit of a frost giant. He passed along Graf Canal, shivering as he glimpsed Black Veil Island tucked into the water's bend. There was where the Kirch wealthy had once buried their dead, in little stone houses above water level. Some trick of the climate kept the island shrouded in shifting mists, and there were rumors that the place was haunted. But Venko hastened his steps. He wasn't a superstitious man. When you had power like his, there was no reason to fear what might lurk in the shadows. But who liked to walk by a graveyard? He burrowed deeper into his coat and made quick time down Havenstraat, keeping keeping alert to the movements in every twisting alley. Soon he'd be back in Ravka, where he could stroll the streets without fear, assuming he got his pardon. Radvenko squirmed uncomfortably in his coat. The war had pitted Grisha against Grisha, and his side had been particularly brutal. He'd murdered former comrades, civilians, even children. But what was done could not be undone. King Nikolai needed soldiers, and Radvenko was a very good soldier. Radvenko nodded once to the guard stashed in the little booth at the entrance of Fourth Harper and glanced over his shoulder, confirming he hadn't been followed. He made his way past the cargo containers to the docks, found the appropriate berth, and stood in line to register with the first mate. Radvenko recognized him from past voyages, always harried and ill-humored, scrawny neck poking from the collar of his coat. He held a thick sheaf of documents, and Radvenko glimpsed the purple wax seal of one of the members of the Church Merchant Council. Those seals were better than gold in the city, guaranteeing the best berth in the harbor and preferred access to the docks. And why did the councilmen garner such respect, such advantage? Because of coin. Because their missions brought profit to Ketterdam. Power meant something more in Ravka, where the elements bent to the will of the Grisha, and the country was ruled by a proper king instead of a cadre of upstart merchants. Admittedly, Radvenko had tried to dispose Admittedly, Radvenko had tried to depose the king's father, but the point remained. We're not ready for the rest of the crew just yet, the first mate said as Radvenko gave his name. You can keep warm in the harbor master's office. We're waiting on our signal from the Council of Tides. Good for you, Radvenko said, unimpressed. He glanced up at one of the black obelisk towers that loomed over the harbor. If there were any chance that the high and mighty Council of Tides could see him from their watchtower, he would have let them know exactly what he thought with a few choice gestures. They were supposedly Grisha, but had they ever lifted a finger to help the other Grisha in the city? To help those down on their luck who might have welcomed a bit of kindness? No, they have not, he answered himself. The first mate winced. Kazan, Redvenko, have you been drinking? No. You stink of whiskey. Redvenko sniffed. Little bit whiskey. Just dry out. Get yourself some coffee or strong jerda. This cotton has to be in jail home in 2 weeks' time, and we aren't paying you to nurse a hangover below decks. Understood? Yes, yes, Redvenko said with a dismissive wave, already heading toward the harbor master's office. But when he saw, but when he was a few steps away, he flicked he flicked his wrist. A tiny whirlwind caught the papers the first mate was holding, sending him flying over the docks. Damn it! He shouted as he went scrambling over the wooden planks, trying to capture the pages of his manifest before they blew into the sea. Redvenko smiled with grim pleasure, then felt a wave of sadness overtake him. He was a giant among men, a gifted squaller, a great soldier. But here he was just an employee, a sad old Ravkin who spoke broken Kirch and drank too much. Home, he told himself. Soon I'll be home. He would get his pardon and prove himself once more. He would fight for his country. He would sleep under a roof that didn't leak and wear a blue wool kefta lined with silver fox fur. He would be, he would be Emil Redvenko again, not this pathetic shadow. There's coffee, said the clerk when Redvenko entered the harbor master's office, gesturing toward a copper urn in the corner. Tea? There's coffee. This country. Redvenko filled a mug full of the dark sludge, more to warm his hands than anything. He couldn't bear the taste of it. Certainly not without a healthy dose of sugar, which the harbor master had neglected to supply. Wind blowing in, wind blowing in, said the clerk as the bell clanged outside, shaken by the rising breeze. I have ears, Redvenko grumbled. Don't think it will amount to much here, but once you get out of the harbor. Be silent, Redvenko said sharply. He was on his feet listening. What? Said the clerk. There's. Redvenko put a finger to his lips. Someone cries out. The sound had come from where the ship was docked. It's just gulls. Sun's coming up soon, and Redvenko raised a hand and a gust of air slammed the clerk back into the wall. I said, be silent. The clerk's mouth dropped open as he hung pinned to the slats. You're the Grisha they got for the crew? For saint's sake. Was Redvenko going to have to pull the air from this boy's lungs and suffocate him into quiet? Through the waxy windows, Redvenko could see the sky beginning to turn blue as dawn arrived. He heard the squawking of gulls searching the waves for breakfast. Maybe the liquor was muddling his mind. Redvenko let the clerk drop to the ground. He'd spilled his coffee, but he didn't want to bother with another cup. Told you it was nothing, said the clerk as he dragged himself to his feet. Didn't have to get all heated up. The clerk dusted himself off and got resettled behind the desk. I've never met one of you before. Grisha, Redvenko snorted. The clerk probably had it and simply didn't know it. You get paid pretty good for the voyages? Not good enough. I. But whatever the clerk was going to say next was lost as the door to the office exploded in a hail of splinters. Redvenko's hands went up to shield his face. He ducked and rolled behind the clerk's desk for cover. A woman entered the office. Black hair, golden eyes. Shoo. The clerk reached for a shotgun Redvenko saw strapped beneath the desk. They've come for the payroll, he shouted. Ain't no one taking the payroll. Redvenko watched in shock as the gangly clerk stood like some kind of avenging warrior and opened fire. By all that was holy, nothing could motivate the Kirch-like cash. Redvenko peeked around the desk in time to see the shotgun blast strike the woman directly in the chest. She was thrown backward and collided with the door jamb, crumpling to the floor. He smelled the sharp burn of gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood. Redvenko's belly gave a shaming lurch. It had been a long time since he'd seen someone shot down in front of him, and that had been in a time of war. Ain't no one taking the payroll, the clerk replied with satisfaction. But before Redvenko could reply, the shoe woman wrapped her bloody hand around the doorframe, hauling herself to her feet. Redvenko blinked. Just how much whiskey had he had? The woman lurched forward. Through the remains of her tattered blouse, Redvenko saw blood, flesh pocked with buckshot, and the glint of what looked like metal. The clerk fumbled to reload, but the woman was too fast. She grabbed the gun from his hands and swatted him down with it, knocking him sideways with a terrible force. She tossed the gun aside and turned her golden eyes on Redvenko. Take payroll, Redvenko shouted, clambering backward. He dug in his pockets and tossed his nearly empty wallet at her. Take what you want. The woman smiled slightly at that. With pity? Amusement? Redvenko did not know, but he understood that she had not come for the money at all. She had come for him, and it didn't matter if she was a slaver or a mercenary or something else entirely. She would face a soldier, not some cowering weakling. He leapt to his feet, muscles responding reluctantly to his demands, and shifted into a fighting stance. His arms arced forward. A howling wind swept through the room, tossing a chair, then the clerk's desk, then the steaming coffee urn at the woman. She batted each item away with little interest, as if she were brushing aside stray cobwebs. Redvenko focused his power and shoved both his hands forward, feeling his ears pop as the pressure dropped and the wind swelled in a surging thunderhead. Maybe this woman couldn't be stopped by bullets. Let's see how she fared against the fury of a storm. The woman growled as the gale seized her, hurtling her back through the open doorway. She seized the jam, trying to keep hold. Ravenko laughed. He'd forgotten how good it felt to fight. Then from behind him he heard a loud crack, the shriek of nails torn free and rending timber. He looked over his shoulder and caught the briefest glimpse of the dawn sky, the wharf. The wall was gone. Strong arms seized him, clasping his hands to his side, preventing him from using his power. He was rising, sailing upward, the harbor shrinking beneath him. He saw the roof of the harbor master's office, the body of the first mate in a heap on the dock. The ship Venko had been meant to sail on, its deck a mess of broken boards, bodies piled near the shattered mast. His attackers had been there first. The air was cold on his face. His heart pounded a ragged rhythm in his ears. Please, he begged as they soared higher, unsure of what he was pleading for, afraid to move too suddenly or too much. He craned his neck to look at his captor. Redvenko released a terrified moan, somewhere between a sob and the panicked whine of an animal caught in a trap. The man holding him was Shu, his black hair pulled in a tight bun. His golden eyes narrowed against the rush of the wind, and from his back emerged two vast wings that beat against the sky, hinged, gracefully wrought in looping silver filigree and taut canvas. Was he an angel? A demon? Some strange mechanical some some strange mechanical come to life. Had Ravenko simply lost his mind? In the arms of his captor, Emil Ravenko saw the shadow they made cast upon the glittering surface of the sea far below. Two heads, two wings, four legs. He had become a great beast, and yet the beast would devour him. His prayers turned to a scream, but both went unanswered. Oh my god. I don't have those commands, Chaos. Jesus. I'm immune to your madness. Jesus. Alright, let me see what I missed. Christ. Guys, I was just gonna read the thingy. The first chapter. Where is my Also, hi Buddha. I will do the stretch right now. I just like what did I do with my little ah book? The sis got me this, by the way. Uh, oop, Book Lovers Club. Admit one lifetime member. It's a cute bookmark. I like it. But hold on. Thank you for the reminder to stretch, Buddha. Sorry I didn't look at it till now. Also, hi Kemma. Thank you for the lurk, and I will hydrate now. Starlings, you should also hydrate with me. Well, shit, I tapped out because of F. Want to miss my chance for first. Oh, oh my god, chaos. That's too damn bad, chaos. Cute. I'll slap that. I slap y'all. That shouty me. Nah. Too bad. Too bad. Did same time as you, lols. Nice. Show them all the bookmarks you got. Ooh, okay. I'm like, did I put it? Oh, it's right here. I'm blind. I showed them before though, I think. But yeah, sis got me a bunch of bookmarks that I love. So she got me this one. But this is so like you can highlight it and stuff or put like tabs over this so you can know what it goes by. She got me this. I love it cuz it's like the reader on one side, but and it looks innocent but on the other side there's a paddle. There's a there's dragons. I like the paddle. She gave me two of that one. And then I think that one's in another book right now currently. And then this cutesy one that's like Halloween. I like the vampire and the spooky ghost in the cauldron. They're so cute. But she also got me these really cool ones. So, um, also okay, first, this one she got me last year, and I love it so much. It's a metal one, the reader. I love that it looks like a tarot card. And then she also got me this one. This one's a new one, the reader, and it's a magnet one. So there's a little magnet in between. Well, there's two magnets. She got me this one because I'm a Cancer. Which is what it is. I'm a Cancer. This one's a cute one too. Fell asleep here. And did I drop one? Okay, no. I got them all in here. But yeah, they're all cute. Show them. They are all cute. The back of the other one is also Wicca. The one with the magnet. Yes, I know. I'm aware. That's also why sis chose it for me. I got some witchy stuff. I mean, you guys see the tarot cards I got. Actually, this reminds me. There's a deck that I don't have up here that I'm like, where is it? I think it fell over behind my desk somewhere, and I'm just like, shit, because that's another one that was gifted to me. That well, Sam had gifted it to me on when he went on the trip, and it's a Dark Angels one, and the that tarot looks a little bit more creepy, but it's pretty too. All right, Trouble. Hello. I have two decks. I see six up there. I know I have one here. I have eight, I guess. I know I have one that's probably like here on the ground somewhere. Yes, thank you for shouting out Trouble. How you doing, Trouble? The Witch's Tarot and the cloud cards. I know Trouble's gonna go live tonight, so when he does, someone tell me. Cloud cards from CCS. Oh, from Cardcaptor Sakura, I think. Is that one like a regulation tarot deck with I think it's 72 cards? 76? I always forget. I have about 14 decks. I wish I had my 14 decks with me. 14 decks of tarot cards or just straight up cards? Because I do have other cards besides tarot cards. Um, I got oracle cards, which are different than tarot. Because tarot is the standard 70. Is it 70? How many is it? I know it's on this one. It's a standard 78, right? So it's got the major arcana and then the four minor arcana. Magic the Gathering. Oh, I'm dumb. I'm sorry. Yes, card capture doctrine. I don't remember. I gotta look it up. Okay. But yeah, I have like eight decks of like regulation tarot cards, and then I got some oracle cards somewhere. Uh, those are different. Yeah, and then also got playing cards here. I got three oracle cards, and I got five decks of playing cards. One of those decks is the Hell of a Boss ones, I believe. Yeah. Of Magic the Gathering. Nice. I don't have a deck yet. I wanted one, and Sam was gonna make it for me. But it was just gonna be a playful one, and I was playing it the online one at one point, but not for long. Yeah, I'm going live soon at about 10:20 maybe. Okay, just someone let me know so I can also be lurking on yours. But I have so many decks: red and white angel, a blue black, a Drowsy deck, and a rainbow deck based on woodland creatures, all theme stuff. Yeah, I wanted to do one of like I wanted to have an angels and demons one or a cats one. So yeah, Magic the Gathering, of course. Yeah, I know what you meant. Cause yeah, my tarot cards are also themed, but they're well, two of them are like the actual original decks, and the other ones are themed. But yeah, all right. I'm gonna read chapter two. Chapter two, Wylan. What am I doing here? That thought had run through Wyland's head at least 6 times a day since he'd met Kazbrecker. But on a night like this, a night when they were working, it rose and fell in his head like a nervous tenor practicing his scales. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Wyland tugged at the hem of his sky blue jacket, the uniform worn by the waiters of the Club Cumulus, and tried to look at ease. Think of it as a dinner party, he told himself. He'd endured countless uncomfortable meals at his father's house. This was no different. In fact, it was easier. No awkward conversation about his studies or when he planned to start classes at the university. All he had to do was stay quiet, follow Kaz's instructions, and figure out what to do with his hands. Clasp them in front? Too much like a singer at a recital. In back? Too military. He tried just dangling them at his sides, but that didn't feel right either. Why hadn't he paid better attention to the way waiters stood? Despite Kaz's assurances that the second floor parlor was theirs for the night, Wyland felt certain that at any minute a real member of the staff would enter the room, point at him, and shout, "Imposter!" Then again, Wyland felt like an imposter most days. It had been just under a week since they'd reached Ketterdam, almost a month since they'd left Jerhome. Wyland had been wearing Kuei's features for most of that time, but whenever he caught a glimpse of his reflection in a mirror or a shop window, it took a long moment to realize he wasn't looking at a stranger. This was his face now: golden eyes, wide brow, black hair. His old self had been scrubbed away, and Wyland wasn't sure he knew the person who remained. The person who was standing in a private parlor in one of the Lid's most luxurious gambling dens, caught up in another of Casbrecker's schemes. A player at the table lifted his champagne glass for a refill, and Wyland darted forward from his perch against the wall. His hands were shaking as he took the bottle from the silver ice bucket, but there were some benefits to the years he'd spent at his father's social functions. He at least knew how to pour a proper glass of champagne without it foaming over. Wyland could almost hear Jesper's mocking voice. Marketable skills, Merchling. He dared a glance at Jesper now. The sharpshooter was seated at the table, hunched over his cards. He wore a battered navy waistcoat embroidered with small gold stars, and his rumpled shirt shone white against his dark brown skin. Jesper rubbed a tired hand over his face. They'd been playing cards for more than 2 hours. Wyland couldn't tell if Jesper's fatigue was real or part of the act. Wyland filled another glass, focusing on Kaz's instructions. Just take the player's orders and keep one ear on Smeet's conversation, he said. It's a job, Wyland. Get it done. Why did they all call it a job? It didn't feel like working. It felt like missing a step and suddenly finding yourself falling. It felt like panic. So Wyland took stock of of the room's details, a trick he'd often used to steady himself whenever he arrived someplace new or when his father was in a particularly foul mood. He inventoried the patterns of interlocking starbursts that formed the polished wood floor, the shell-shaped nodes of the blown glass chandelier, the cobalt silk wallpaper flecked with silver clouds. No windows to allow in natural light. Cass said none of the gambling dens had them, because the bosses wanted players to lose track of time. Wyland watched Kaz deal another hand to Smeet, Jesper, and the other players at the round table. He wore the same sky blue staff jacket as Wyland, and his hands were bare. Wyland had to fight not to stare at them. It wasn't just the strangeness, the wrongness of seeing Kaz without his gloves. It was that his hands seemed animated by a secret machinery Wyland didn't understand. When he had started to learn figure drawing, Wyland had studied anatomy illustrations. He had a good grasp of musculature, the way bones and joints and ligaments fit together. But Kaz's hands moved as if they had been made for no other purpose than to manipulate cards. Long white fingers flexing in easy rhythm, the shuffle precise, each turn economical. Kaz had claimed he could control any deck, so why was Jesper losing so badly? When Kaz had outlined this part of the plan at the hideout on Black Veil, Wyland had been incredulous, and for once, he hadn't been the only one with questions. Let me get this straight, Nina had said. Your grand scheme is to give Jesper a line of credit and make him play cards with Cornelius Smeet. Smeet likes high stakes, three-man bramble and blondes, said Kaz. So, we're going to give him them. Smeet likes high stakes, three-man bramble and blondes, said Kaz. So we're going to give him both. I'll deal the first half of the night, then Specht will take over. Wyland didn't know Specht well. He was a former Navy seaman, a member of the dregs who had piloted their ship to and from the ice court. If Wyland was honest, between the grizzled jaw and the tattoos that ran halfway up Specht's neck, he found the sailor slightly frightening. But even Specht had looked concerned when he said, I can deal cards, Kaz, but I can't control a deck. You don't have to. From the time you sit down, it will be an honest game. The important thing is to keep Smeed at the table until midnight. The shift change is when we risk losing him. As soon as I stand up, he's going to start thinking about moving on to another game or calling it a night. So you all need to do everything you can to keep his ass firmly planted at the table. I can handle it, Jesper said. Nina had just scowled. Sure, and maybe for phase 2 of this plan, I can masquerade as a Jurda Parem dealer. What could possibly go wrong? Wylan wouldn't have put it that way exactly, but he agreed. Strongly. They should be keeping Jesper away from gambling dens, not encouraging his love of risk. But Kaz hadn't been moved. Just do your job and keep Smeet thoroughly enthralled until midnight, he said. You know what's on the line. They all did, in Nesh's life. And how could Wylan argue with that? He felt a pang of guilt every time he thought about it. Van Eck had said he would give them 7 days to give up Kuei Yilbo. Then then he would begin torturing Inej. They were almost out of time. Wylan knew he couldn't have prevented his father from double-crossing the crew and kidnapping her. He knew that. But he still felt responsible. What am I supposed to do with Cornelis Smeet after midnight? Nina asked. Try to talk him into spending the night with you. What? Matthias had sputtered, red flooding his face all the way up to his ears. He won't say yes. Nina sniffed. Like hell he won't. Nina, Matthias growled. Smeet never cheats at cards or on his wife, Cass said. He's like half the amateur strutting around the barrel. Most of the time he's respectable, scrupulous, strict economics, and half a glass of wine at dinner. But once a week, he enjoys feeling like an outlaw, matching wits with the high rollers on East Dave, and he likes a pretty blonde in his arm when he does it. Nina pursed her lips. If he's so moral, then why do you want me to try to? Because Smeet's rolling in coin, and any self-respecting girl from West Dave would at least make the effort. I don't like this, said Matthias. Jesper smiled his reckless gunslinger's grin. To be fair, Matthias, you don't like much. Keep Smeet at Club Cumulus from 8 bells until midnight, Cass said. That's 4 hours of play, so stay smart about it. Nina was certainly doing her best, and Wyland didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. She was dressed in a sheer lavender gown rigged with some kind of corset that pushed her cleavage to alarming heights. And though she'd lost weight since her battle with Perem, there was still plenty of her for Smeet to grab onto. She'd settled her rump firmly on his knee, arm around his shoulder, and was cooing prettily in his ear, her hand caressing his chest and occasionally slipping beneath his jacket like a beagle searching for treats. She stopped only to order oysters or another bottle of champagne. Wyland knew Nina could handle just about any man in any situation, but he didn't think she should have to sit half-dressed in a drafty gambling parlor, perched on some leering lawyer's lap. At the very least, she was probably going to catch cold. Jesper folded yet again and blew out a long, exasperated breath. He'd been losing slowly for the last 2 hours. He'd kept his bids cautious, but neither luck nor Kaz seemed to be on his side tonight. How were they supposed to keep Smeet at the table if Jesper ran out of funds? Would the other high-stakes players be enough of a lure? There were a few of them in the room, lingering by the walls, watching the game, each hoping to nab a seat if someone crashed out. None of them knew the real game Kaz was running. As Wyland leaned down to refill Nina's glass, he heard Smeet murmur, A card game is like a duel. It's the little cuts and slashes that set the stage for the final killing stroke. He glanced across the table to Jesper. That lad is bleeding all over the
Hey,
table.
hey!
Oh god. Hi! Oh my god, hi. Hi Juvie, how you doing? The We Happy Few. I've seen the cover of that game. I have no idea what it's about. Also I'm just realizing I should move my alert box forward. Yeah, there we go. He's jelly that his girl's grabbing attention. He is Eli. Welcome in, Raiders. Welcome to the sanctuary. I love that. I know chaos. Welcome into the sanctuary. I'm reading tonight. I'm Lola Violet. I call my community the Starlings. Welcome in. Not gonna lie, I have no idea what to do in that game. Oh my gosh. I don't know anything about that game. I've just seen like the pictures. Okay, chaos, relax. Jesus, I will do all the human maintenance stuff. Starlings, take a drink. Take a drink with me, please. Oh, and you missed it. My friend made me sing. Oh, I love that. No, that's awesome. I will stretch. And what do you want me to show off? Okay. Huh. Do I have anything I can show off? I technically did show off already. I put if you're in my Discord, I put pictures of the posters and stickers that I have on my wall, including this one here is a painting my friend did that has to do with this book series. So this is I'm reading Crooked Kingdom. We're on chapter 2. So we just started it, but Six of Crows was before it, and I finished that last night. And so now we're starting this one. I already showed off my bookmarks that sis gave me. I'm trying to think, what else do I have that I could show off? I have like smaller things up here around me. Uh, Chaos, you put me in a bind. Let me think. All right. I also think I trying to remember if I've talked about anything with Juvie. You showed us before the Raider, so deal with it. Okay. Uh, you mean the let me think. I'm like, do I have anything besides Six of Crows right now that I want to show you guys? I mean, I can show you the. So this is the what I was reading yesterday, Six of Crows, and I was lucky, and I got to meet the author at the LA Times Book Festival, and she signed it for me, and I was so pleased. I was so happy. So there, I have that copy of the book signed. I don't have this one signed because I don't think I took it with me the day that I went. I think I just took that one, and I think I took another book because there was another author I knew that was gonna be there, and so I had them sign my books. Mm, I mean, I have a collection of Funko Pops, but the closest one to me that I don't need to get up for is this one. I got Beetlejuice from the new Beetlejuice from the newest movie, the latest movie. I hear there's gonna be a third one, and it seems like that was it was set up for like a third one. And one of my friends got me this for a Christmas, this pretty candle, and I got this new I got this cup as a candle holder from the Salvation Army last weekend. But all right, let me continue reading. Um, I forgot where I was. Oh, okay. A card game is like a duel. It's the little cuts and slashes that set the stage for the final killing stroke. He glanced across the table to Jesper. That lad is bleeding all over the table. I don't know how you keep the rules straight in your head, Nina said with a giggle. Smeet grinned, clearly pleased. This is nothing compared to managing a business. I can't imagine how you do that either. Sometimes I don't know myself, Smeet said on a sigh. It's been a hard week. One of my clerks never came back from his holiday, and that meant I was stuck short-handed. Wyla nearly dropped the bottle he was holding. Champagne splashed onto the floor. I'm paying to drink it, not wear it, boy, snapped Smeet. He wiped at his trousers and muttered, That's what comes from hiring foreigners. He means me, Wyland realized as he backed away hurriedly. He didn't know how to make the reality of his new shoe feature sink in. He couldn't even speak shoe, a fact that hadn't worried him until two tourists with a map in hand had waylaid him on East Dave. Wyland had panicked, made an elaborate shrugging gesture, and bolted for the servants' entrance to Club Cumulus. Poor baby, Nina said to Smeet, running her fingers through his thinning hair and adjusting one of the flowers tucked into her silky blonde tresses. Milo wasn't sure if she'd actually told Smeet she was from the House of the Blue Iris, but he certainly would have assumed so. Jesper leaned back in his seat, fingers tapping the handles of his revolvers. The movement seemed to draw Smeet's eyes. Those guns are remarkable. Real mother of pearl in the handles, if I'm not mistaken, Smeet said in the tones of a man who was rarely mistaken. I have a fine collection of firearms myself, though nothing in the line of as many repeating revolvers. Oh, I'd love to see your guns, Nina cooed, and Wyland looked at the ceiling in an attempt to avoid rolling his eyes. Are we going to sit here all night? Wyland tried to hide his confusion. Wasn't the whole point to get him to stay? But apparently Nina knew better, because Smeet's face took on a slightly mulish cast. Hush now. If I win big, I may buy you something pretty. I'll settle for some more oysters. You haven't finished those. Wellen caught the quiver of Nina's nostrils and thought she might be drawing a fortifying breath. She'd had no appetite since she'd recovered from her bout with Perem, and he didn't know how she managed to slurp down nearly a dozen oysters. Now he watched her swallow the last of them with a shudder. Delicious, she managed with a glance at Wylan. Let's have some more. That was a signal. Wylan swooped in and picked up the big dish laden with ice and discarded shells. The lady has a craving, Smeet said. Oysters, miss? Wylan asked. His voice sounded too high. Buttered prawns? Too low. She'll have both, said Smeet indulgently, and another flute of champagne. Marvelous, Nina said, looking slightly green. Rylan rushed through the swinging doors to the servants' pantry. It was stocked with plates, glassware, napkins, and a tin tub full of ice. The dumbwaiter took up a large section of the far wall, and there was a trumpet-shaped speaking tube next to it, to allow the staff to communicate with the kitchen. Wyland set the dish of ice and shells on the table. Then he called down to the kitchen for oysters and buttered prawns. Oh, and another bottle of champagne. What vintage? More of the same? Wyland had heard his father's friend talk about which wines made for good investments, but he didn't quite trust himself to choose a year. By the time he returned to the parlor with Nina's order, Kaz was standing up from the table. He made a gesture as if he was dusting off his hands, the sign that a dealer had finished his shift. Specht sat down, a blue silk cravat tied at his throat to hide his tattoos. He took out his cuffs and play and he shook out his cuffs and called for players to ante up or cash out. Kaz Kaz's eyes met Wyland's as he vanished into the pantry. This was the moment. According to Kaz and Jesper, a player often thought his luck was bound to the dealer and would stop playing at the shift change. Wyland watched in distress as Smeet stretched and gave Nina's bottom a firm pat. We've had a good run, he said, glancing at Jesper, who was staring dejectedly at his meager pile of remaining chips. We may find fatter game elsewhere. But my food just came, pouted Nina. Wyland stepped forward, unsure of what to say, only knowing that they had to delay Smeet. Is everything to your liking, sir? Can I offer you and the lady something more? Smeet ignored him, hand still hovering over Nina's backside. There's finer victuals and better service to be had all over the lid, my dear. A big man in a striped suit approached Smeet, eager to snag a seat. Cashing out? Smeet gave Jesper a friendly nod. Looks like we both are, eh, lad? Better luck next time. Jesper didn't return the smile. I'm not done here. Smeet gestured to Smeet gestured to Jesper's sad stack of chips. Certainly looks like you are. Jesper rose and reached for his guns. Wyland clutched the bottle of champagne in his hands as the other players pushed back from the table, ready to grab their own weapons or dive for cover. But all Jesper did was unsling his gun belt. Gently, he laid the revolvers on the table, fingers brushing over the high gloss ridges with care. How much for these? He asked. Wyland tried to catch Jesper's eye. Was this part of the plan? And even if it was, what was Jesper thinking? He loved those guns. He might as well cut off his own hand and throw it in the pot. Specht cleared his throat and said, "The Cumulus isn't a pawn shop. We accept cash and credit from the Gemmen's Bank only." "I'll stake you," Smeet said with studied disinterest, "if it will get the game moving again. 1,000 Kruger for the guns? They're worth 10 times that. 5,000 Kruger. 7. 6. And that's only because I'm feeling generous." "Don't!" Wyland blurted. The room was silent. Jesper's voice was cold. "I don't remember asking for your advice." "The insolence," said Smeet. "Since when do waiters involve themselves in gameplay?" Nina glared at Wyland, and Speck's tone was furious with disbelief when he said, "Gentlemen, shall we get the game rolling again? Ante up." Jesper shoved his revolvers across the table to Smeet, and Smeet slid a tall stack of chips over to Jesper in return. "All right," said Jesper, his gray eyes bleak. "Deal me in." Wyland stepped back from the table and disappeared into the pantry as quickly as he could. The dish of ice and shells was gone, and Kaz was waiting. He'd thrown a long orange cape over his blue jacket. His gloves were already back in place. "Kaz," Wyland said desperately, "Jesper just put his guns up." "How much did he get for them?" "Why does that matter? 5,000 Kruger? 6. Good. Not even Jesper should be able to run through that in less than 2 hours." He tossed Wyland a cape and mask. "The trappings of the Grey Imp, one of the characters of the comedy brute. Let's go." "Me?" "No, the idiot behind you." Cass picked up the speaking trumpet and said, "Send up another waiter. This one managed to spill champagne on some high roller shoes." Someone in the kitchen laughed and said, "You got it." They were down the stairs and out the servants' entrance bare moments later, their costumes allowing them to move anonymously through the crowds of East Day. "You knew Jesper would lose." "You made sure of it," Wyland accused. Kaz rarely used his cane when there were roaming parts of the city where he might be recognized, but despite his lopsided gait, Wyland had to jog to keep up with him. "Of course I did. I control the game, Wyland, or I don't play. I could have made sure Jesper won every hand. Then why We weren't there to win at cards. We needed Smeet to stay at the tables. He was ogling those guns almost as much as Nina's cleavage. Now he's feeling confident, like he's in for a good night. If he loses, he'll still keep playing. Who knows? Jesper may even win his revolvers back. I hope so, said Wylan as they hopped into a brow boat crowded with tourists and headed south down the stave. You would. What's that supposed to mean? Someone like Jesper wins two hands and starts to call it a streak. Eventually he loses, and that just leaves him hungrier for the next run of good luck. The house relies on it. Then why make him walk into a gambling den? Wyland thought but just Wyland thought but didn't say. And why make Jesper give up something that meant so much to him? There had to be another way to keep Smeet playing, but those weren't even the right questions. The real question was why Jesper did it all without hesitating. Maybe he was still looking for Kaz's approval, hoping to earn back his favor after Jesper's slip had led them into the ambush at the docks that nearly after Jesper's slip had led them into the ambush at the docks that had nearly cost Nesh her life. Or maybe Jesper wanted something more than forgiveness from Kaz. What am I doing here? Wylan wondered again. He found himself gnawing on his thumb and forced himself to stop. He was here for Neige. She'd saved their lives more than once, and he wasn't going to forget that. He was here because he desperately needed the money. And if there was another reason, a tall, lanky reason with a too strong taste for games of chance, he wasn't going to think about that right now. As soon as they made it to the outskirts of the barrel, Wylan and Kaz ditched their capes and sky blue jackets and wended their way east into the Zelvar district. Matthias was waiting for them beneath a darkened doorway Handen, on Handel Canal. All clear? Kaz asked. All clear, said the big Fjerdan. The lights went out on the top floor of Smeet's house more than an hour ago, but I don't know if the servants are awake. He only has a daily maid and cook, Kaz said. He's too cheap for full-time servants. How is... Nina is fine. Jesper is fine. Everyone is fine except for me, because I'm stuck with a gang of hand-wringing nursemaids. Keep a watch. Wyland shrugged apologetically at Matthias, who looked like he was considering dashing Kaz's skull against a wall, then hurried along the cobblestones after Kaz. Smeet's home also served as his office, and it was located on a dark street with sparse foot traffic. The lamps were lit along the canal, and candles burned in some of the windows, but after 10 bells, most of the neighborhood's respectable citizens had already retired. Are we just going in through the front door? Use your eyes instead of running your mouth, said Kaz, lockpicks already flashing in his gloved hands. I am, Wyland thought. But that wasn't strictly true. He'd taken in the house's proportions, the pitch of its gabled roof, the roses beginning to bloom in its window boxes, but he hadn't looked at the house as a puzzle. With some frustration, Wyland could admit this was an easy solve. The Zelver district was prosperous, but not truly wealthy, a place for successful artisans, bookkeepers, and barristers. Though the house, though the houses were built tidy, though the houses were built and tidy, with views of a wide canal, they were tightly packed together, and there were no grand gardens or private docks. To access the windows of the upper floors, he and Kaz would have had to break into a neighboring home and go through two sets of locks instead of one. Better to risk the front door, to simply act as if they had every right to be there, even if Kaz was carrying picks instead of keys. Use your eyes. But Wyland didn't like looking at the world the way Kaz did, and once they'd gotten their money, he'd never have to again. A bare second later, Kaz pressed down on the handle and the door swung open. Immediately, Wyland heard the patter of paws, claws on hard wood, low snarls, as Smeet's pack of hounds rushed the door, white teeth flashing, growls rumbling deep in their chests. Before they could realize someone other than their masters had come to call, Kaz pushed Smeet's whistle between his lips and blew. Nina had managed to slip it from the chain the lawyer always wore around his neck, and then tucked it beneath an empty oyster shell for Wyland to whisk into the kitchen. There was no sound from the whistle, at least not one that Wyland could hear. It's not going to work, he thought, imagining those huge jaws tearing into his throat. But the dogs skidded to a halt, bumping into one another in a confused tangle. Kaz blew again, lips pursing in time with the pattern of a new command. The dogs quieted and flopped to the floor with a disgruntled whine. One even rolled over on its back. Sorry, I see the ads are gonna go, and I have 3-minute ads every hour. I'm sorry about that, Starlings. But after the ads, we will continue. I don't want you guys to get left behind. So if you guys haven't already, go get some snacks. Go get a tea. Go get water. That's a big thick book. It is. It is, Thea. Hi, Thea. How you doing? This is the sequel to the last book. Oop, there the ads go. I'm gonna mute because I gotta do something on my phone. Oh, yep. Welcome back from the ads, darlings. It's the it's the Maka Chop book. It is a really thick book. I'm very happy with it. I mean, it's like the same size as the last one. It's not, you know, I don't know. Can you blame me? I like thick books. uh, I couldn't help myself. All right, give me a second, and then let me put this down. All right. Okay. Now, now why can't people be this easily trained? Kaz murmured as he crouched to oblige the dog with a belly rub. Black of black gloved fingers smoothing the short fur. Close the door behind you. Orland did and stood with his back pressed to it, keeping a wary eye on the pile of slavering hounds. The whole house smelled of dog. Damp fur, oily hides, warm breath moist with the stink of raw meat. Not fond of animals? Kaz asked. I like dogs, Wyland said, just not when they're the size of bears. Wyland knew the real Wyland knew the real puzzle of Smeat's house had been a thorny one for Kaz to solve. Cass could pick just about any lock and outthink any system of alarms, but he hadn't been able to come up with a simple way around Smeat's bloodthirsty hounds that wouldn't leave their plan exposed. During the day, the dogs were kept in a kennel, but at night they were given free run of the house while Smeat's family slept peacefully in the richly appointed rooms of the third floor. The staircase closed off by an iron gate. Smeat walked the dogs himself, up and down the Handel Canal, trailing after them like a tubby sled in an expensive hat. Nina had suggested drugging the dog's food. Smeat went to the butcher every morning to select cuts of meats for the pack, and it would have been easy enough to switch the parcels, but Smeat wanted his dogs hungry at night, so he fed them in the mornings. He would have noticed if his prize pets hadn't been sluggish all day, and they couldn't risk Smeat staying home to take care for his hounds. He had to spend the evening on Eastave, and when he returned home, it was essential that he find nothing amiss. Inej's life depended upon it. Kaz had arranged for the private parlor in the cumulus. Nina had caressed the whistle from beneath Smeat's shirt, and piece by piece, the plan had come together. Ryland did not want to think about what they'd done to obtain the whistle commands. He shivered when he remembered what Smeat had said. One of my clerks never came back from his holiday. He never would. Ryland could still hear the clerk screaming as Kaz dangled him by the ankles from the top of Hanrat Point Lighthouse. I'm a good man, he shouted. I'm a good man. They were the last words he'd spoken. If he'd talked less, he might have lived. Now Wylan watched Kaz give the drooling dog a scratch behind the ears and rise. Let's go. Watch your feet. They sliced up the pile of dog bodies in the hall and made their way quietly up the stairs. The layout of Smeat's house was familiar to Wylan. Most business in the city followed the same plan: a kitchen and public rooms for meeting with clients on the ground floor, offices and storage on the second floor, sleeping rooms for the family on the third floor. Very wealthy homes had a fourth floor for servants' quarters. As a boy, Wyland had spent more than a few hours hiding from his father in his own home's upper rooms. Not even locked, Kaz murmured as they entered Smeat's office. The hounds have made him lazy. Kaz closed the door and lit a lamp, turning the flame down low. The office had three small desks arranged by the windows to take advantage of the natural light. One for Smeat and two for his clerks. I'm a good man. Wyland shook off the memory and focused on the shelves that ran from floor to ceiling. They were lined with ledgers and boxes full of documents, each carefully labeled with what Wyland assumed were the names of clients and companies. So many pigeons, Kaz murmured, eyes scanning the boxes. Nathan Borg, that sad little skiv Carl Dryden. Smeat represents half the merchant council, including Wyland's father. Smeat had served as Jan van Eyck's attorney and property manager for as long as Wyland could remember. Where do we start? Wyland whispered. Kaz pulled a fat ledger from the shelves. First, we make sure your father has no new acquisitions under his name. First, we make sure your father has no new acquisitions under his name. Then, we search under your stepmother's name and yours. Don't call her that. Alice is barely older than I am, and my father won't have kept her up. I. All right, hold on. I like textbooks, and I kind of like Smashing Skulls is how you die. Eli, that's really good. He's live. Okay. Okay. I will lurk. I will lurk. God damn it! I saw my own stream buffer just then. Come on. Lay on the grass. Well, I also can't tell if it's the internet on my tablet right now because my tablet looks like it's acting up. Okay. All right. Don't call her that. Alice is barely older than I am, and my father won't have kept property in my name. You'd be surprised at what a man will do to avoid paying taxes. They spent the better part of the next hour digging through Smeat's files. They knew all about Van Eck's
Hey,
public
hey!
properties, the factories. Gabe! Holy shit, hi! Y'all surprised me. How are you doing? Ready Player Gabe, a digital adventure with 9 years of streaming under their belt. They're on a quest through digital worlds, rescuing princesses, and maybe even saving Santa. Expect JRPGs, anime vibes, and plenty of LGBTQIA plus love along the way. Hello, welcome in, gamers. Welcome to the sanctuary. I call my community starlings. Um, thank you for the raid, Gabe. I appreciate it. I'm reading a book tonight. I'm reading the sequel to the book I was reading yesterday. Um, gosh. Uh, Wolf Wolf but Dweeb is live. I know. I'm aware. I have trouble pulled up on my on my computer, on my tablet. Gave the licking the licking tongue one is great. But yeah, yesterday I finished reading Six of Crows, and now we're reading the sequel, Cricket Kingdom, and we're in chapter two. But yeah, you told us to tell you. I know, but Eli told me a hot minute ago too. Eli said he's live like 5 minutes ago, and so I did. Interesting. I need to get back to reading some stuff, right? I and I love this series. Um, it's a duology, so there's only two. So it's this is the last one of that series, right? Even though there's other series that have like cameos of the characters and stuff like that, but of these characters specifically, um, there's just the two, right? Where they're like the main focus. Because there's a few other series I think that they're in by the same author, but they're like I said, they're cameos. Um, and so yeah, we're in the second chapter. The last Oh my god, last night was amazing. I stayed up late reading last night. Right, I love my new lick emote. Oh my god, I love it. It's okay, Chaos. I do the same, lol. And so, yeah. Uh, but yeah, if even if you guys are like, what the hell is happening? I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm reading a Marvel What If book. Is What If like an actual? Is it like an actual book or is it a comic book? Like, you get what I mean. Is it a comic or is it like a novel? Is what I'm trying to ask. Because comics are real books, but you get what I mean. Like, yeah, like is it written out or is it a comic form book? Because I have some comic books actually, but they're like over there. I don't. I should read more of them honestly. But yeah, it's a novel book. Okay. 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 Got it. I did recently get. I did recently get this Loki, and I am interested to read this and see what is going on. I also feel like I'm gonna have to watch the show before this. Maybe I don't know. Even though I know it's like its own twisted thing. I'm reading one called "What If Wanda Was Related to Spider-Man." That's pretty cool. That sounds like a fanfic. It sounds awesome though. You know what I mean? Like, like I love reading fanfics. So I love when like someone takes something from this universe and they're like, "But what if we did this with it?" And I'm like, "What?" Those are awesome. I love the like changing the scenarios or changing the universes kind of thing. They're so much fun. All right, but I don't want to leave everyone hanging on what's happening. So, um, yeah. Uh, I'll send you a pic of it. Oh yes, put it in the Discord, or yeah, or just send me the pic that you have. But yeah, um, where did I leave off? Oh, they spent the better part of the next hour digging through Smeat's files. They knew all about Van Eck's public properties, the factories, hotels, and manufacturing plants, the shipyard, the country house, and farmland in southern Kirch. But Kaz believed Wyland's father had to have private holdings, places he'd kept off the public registers, places he'd stashed something, or someone he didn't want found. Kaz read names and ledger entries aloud, asking Wyland questions and trying to find connections to properties or to companies that they hadn't yet discovered. Wyland knew he owed his father nothing, but it still felt like a betrayal. Geldspin? Asked Kaz. A cotton mill. I think it's in Zierfort. Too far. He won't be keeping her there. What about Firma Alberest? Firma Allerbest. Wyland searched his memory. I think that one's a cannery. They're both practically printing cash, and they're both in Alice's name. But Van Eck keeps the big earners to himself. The shipyard, the silos at Sweet Reef. I told you, Wyland said, fiddling with a pen on one of the blotters. My father trusts himself first. Alice only so far. He wouldn't leave anything in my name. Kaz just said, next, Ledger. Let's start with the commercial properties. Wyland stopped fiddling with the pen. Was there something in my name? Kaz leaned back. His look was almost challenging when he said, a printing press. The same old joke. So why did it still sting? Wyland set the pen down. I see. He's not what I would call a subtle man. EL comedy is in your name, too. Of course it is, Wyland replied, wishing he sounded less bitter. Another private laugh for his father to enjoy. An abandoned island with nothing on it but a broken down amusement park. A worthless place for his worthless, illiterate son. He shouldn't have asked. As the minutes ticked away and Cass continued reading aloud, Wyland became increasingly agitated. If he could just read, they'd be moving as If he could just read, they'd be moving twice as fast with the files. In fact, Wyland would already know his father's business inside out. I'm slowing you down, he said. Cass slipped open another sheaf of documents. I knew exactly how long this would take. What was your mother's family name? There's nothing in her name. Humor me. Hendricks. Kaz walked to the shelves and selected another ledger. When did she die? When I was 8. Wyland picked up the pen again. My father got worse after she was gone. At least, that was how Wyland remembered it. The months after his mother's death were a blur of sadness and silence. He would let me go to her funeral. He wouldn't let me go to her funeral. I don't even know where she's buried. Why do you guys say that anyway? No mourners, no funerals. Why not just say good luck or be safe? We like to keep our expectations low. Kaz's gloved finger trailed up down a column of numbers and stopped. His eyes moved back and forth between two ledgers. Then he snapped the leather cover shut. Let's go. Did you find something? Kaz nodded once. I know where she is. Wyland didn't think he imagined the tension in the rasp of Kaz's voice. Kaz never yelled the way Wyland's father did, but Wyland had learned to listen for that low note, that bit of black harmony that crept into Kaz's tone when things were about to get dangerous. He had heard it after the fight at the docks when Inej lay bleeding from Uman's knife. Then when Kaz had learned it was Pekka Rollins who had tried to ambush them again. Again when they'd been double crossed by Wyland's father. He'd heard it loud and clear atop the lighthouse as the clerk screamed for his life. Wyland watched as Kaz set the rooms to rights. He moved an envelope a little more to the left, pulled the drawer on the largest file cabinet out a bit further, pushed the chair back just so. When he was done, he scanned the room, then plucked the pen from Wyland's hands and set it carefully in its place on the desk. A proper thief is like a proper poison merchling. He leaves no trace. Kaz blew the lamp out. Your father much for charity? No, he ties to Gezin, but he says charity robs men of the chance at honest labor. Well, he's been making donations to the Church of St. Hildy for the last 8 years. If you want to pay your respects to your mother, that's probably the place to start. Wyland stared at Kaz dumbly in the shadowy room. He'd never heard of the Church of St. Hildy, and he'd never known Dirty Hands to share any bit of information that wouldn't serve him. What? If Nina and Jesper did their jobs right, Smeet will be home soon. We can't be here when he gets back, or the whole plan goes to hell. Come on. Wyland felt like he had been bashed over the head with a ledger and then told to just forget about it. Kaz cracked open the door. They both stopped short. Over Kaz's shoulder, Wyland saw a little girl standing on the landing, leaning on the neck of one of the massive gray dogs. She had to be about 5, her toes barely visible beneath the hems of her flannel nightgown. Oh, Gezin, Wyland whispered. Kaz stepped out into the hall, pulling the door nearly shut behind him. Wyland hesitated in the darkened office, unsure of what he should do, terrified of what Kaz might do. The girl looked up at Kaz with big eyes, then removed her thumb from her mouth. Do you work for my da? No. The memory came at Wyland again. I'm a good man. They'd ambushed the clerk coming out of the menagerie and hauled him to the top of the lighthouse. Kaz had held him by his ankles, and the clerk had wet himself, screaming and begging for mercy before he'd finally given up Smeet's whistle commands. Kaz had been about to reel him back up when the clerks had started offering things. Money, bank account numbers for Smeet's clients, and then, I've got information on one of the girls of the menagerie, the Zemeni. Kaz had paused. What do you have on her? Wyland had heard it then, that low, dangerous note of warning. But the clerk didn't know Kaz, didn't recognize the change in the rough scrape of his voice. He thought he'd found a wedge, something Kaz wanted. One of her clients is giving her expensive gifts. She's keeping the money. You know what the She's keeping the money. You know what the peacock did to the last girl she caught holding out on her? I do, Cass said, his eyes glinting like the edge of a straight razor. Tante Helene beat her to death. Kaz, Wyland had attempted, but the clerk kept talking. Right there in the parlor. This girl knows she's cooked if I tell. She sees me for free just so I keep my mouth shut. Sneaks me in. She'll do the same for you, your friends, whatever you like. If Tante Helene found out, she'd kill your Zemeni, said Kaz. She'd make an example of her to the other girls. Yes, the clerk gasped eagerly. She'll do anything you want. Everything. Slowly, Kaz began to let the man's legs slide through his grasp. It's terrible, isn't it? knowing someone holds your life in his hands. The clerk's voice rose another octave as he realized his mistake. She's just a working girl, he screamed. She knows the score. I'm a good man. I'm a good man. There are no good men in Ketterdam, Cass said. The climate doesn't agree with them. And then he'd simply let go. Wayland shuddered. Through the crack in the door, he saw Cass squat down so he could look the little girl in the eye. What's this big fellow? What's this big fellow's name? Cass said, laying a hand on the dog's wrinkled neck. This is Maestro Spots. Is that so? He has a very fine howl. Doll lets me name all the puppies. Is Maestro Spots your favorite? Asked Kaz. She appeared to think, then shook her head. I like Duke Adam von Silverhaunch best, then Fuzzle Muzzle, then Maestro Spots. That's good to know, Hannah. Her mouth opened into a little O. How do you know my name? I know all children's names. You do? Oh, yes. Albert, who lives next door, and Gertrude on Umberstraat. I live under their beds and in the backs of the closets. I knew it, the girl breathed, fear and triumph in her voice. Mamma said there was nothing there, but I knew it. She cocked her head to one side. You don't look like a monster. I'll tell you a secret, Hannah. The real bad monsters never look like monsters. Now the little girl's lip trembled. Did you come to eat me? Doss says monsters eat children who don't go to bed when they're told. They do, but I won't. Not tonight. If you do two things for me. His voice was calm, almost hypnotic. It had the coarse rasp of an over rosined bow. First, you must crawl into bed. And second, you must never tell anyone you've seen us, especially your da. He leaned forward and gave Hannah's braid a playful tug. Because if you do, I'll slit your mother's throat and then your father's, and then I'll cut out the hearts of all those sweet slobbering hounds. I shall save Duke Silverhaunch for last, so that you will know it's all your fault. The little girl's face was as white as the lace on the neck of her nightgown, her eyes wide and bright as new moons. Do you understand? She nodded frantically, chin wobbling. Now, no tears. Monsters see tears and it only whets their appetites. Off to bed with you, and take that useless Maestro Spots along too. She skittered backward over the landing and up the stairs. When she was halfway up, she cast a terrified glance back at Kaz. He raised one gloved finger to his lips. When she was gone, Wyland slipped out from behind the door and followed Kaz down the steps. How could you say something like that to her? She's just a child. We were all just children once. But it was that or snap her neck and make it look like she fell on the stairs, Wyland. I think I showed remarkable restraint. Move. They picked their wa- they picked their way past the rest of the dogs still flopped down in the hallway. Incredible, Cass said. They'd probably stay like that all night. He blew on the whistle and they leapt up, ears pricked, ready to guard the house. When Smeet returned home, all would be as it should. Hounds pacing the ground floor, office intact on the second floor. Wife wife snoozing comfortably on the third floor, and daughter pretending to do the same. Cass checked the street and then waved Wylan outside, pausing only to lock the door behind them. They hurried down the cobblestones. Wylan peered over his shoulder. He couldn't quite believe they had gotten away with it. Stop looking around like you think someone's following you, Cass said, and stop scurrying. You couldn't look guiltier if you were performing the role of thief number 3 in a penny play on East Stave. Next time, walk normally. Try to look like you belong. There isn't going to be a next time. Of course not. Keep your collar up. Wyland didn't argue. Until Inej was safe, until they'd gotten the money they'd been promised, he couldn't make any grand ultimatums. But there would have but there would be an end to this. There had to be, didn't there? Matthias gave a high bird call from the other end of the street. Kaz glanced at his watch and ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it wildly. Right on time. They rounded the corner and slammed directly into Cornelis Smeet. Whew. Okay. Sorry. Oh, God. Okay, now I can take a moment. Hey, Buddha. God, okay. Chapter 3 Matthias. Matthias kept to the shadows, watching this strange play unfold. Cornelis Smeet tipped, losing his footing, hat sliding from his nearly bald head. The boy had run into him, stepped forward, offering assistance. The boy was Kaz, but he was not Kaz. His dark hair was mussed, his manner flustered. He kept his eyes averted, his chin tucked into his collar as if hopelessly embarrassed. A green youth, respectful of his elders. Wyland hovered behind him, shrunken so deeply into his coat Matthias thought he might actually disappear. Watch where you're going, Smith huffed indignantly, resettling the hat on his head. Terribly sorry, sir, Cass said, brushing the shoulders of Smith's jacket. Curse my clumsiness. He bent to the cobblestones. Oh dear, I think you dropped your wallet. So I did, Smeet said in surprise. Thank you very much. Then, as Matthias watched in disbelief, Smeet opened his billfold and drew out a crisp 5 Kruger bill. There you are, young man. Pays to be honest. Kaz kept his head down, but somehow managed to convey humble appreciation as he murmured, Too kind, sir. Too kind. May Gesden be as generous. The portly lawyer went on his way, hat askew, humming a little tune, oblivious to the fact that he just run directly into the car dealer who had sat across from him for 2 hours in Club Cumulus. Smead arrived at his door and pulled a chain from his shirt, then frantically patted his waistcoat, searching for his whistle. You didn't put it on the chain? Asked Matthias as Kaz and Wyland joined him in the dark doorway. He knew such tricks were well within Kaz's capabilities. Didn't bother. Smeat rooted around his shirt, then fished out the whistle and unlocked the door, humming once more. Matthias could not fathom it. He'd kept his gaze trained on Kaz's gloved hand as he'd fussed over Smeat, but even knowing that Kaz intended to return the whistle, Matthias hadn't been able to detect the moment of deception. He was tempted to drag Smeat back and make Kaz perform the trick again. Kaz neatened his hair with his fingers and handed the 5 Kruger to Wyland. Don't spend it all in one place. Let's move. Matthias ushered them along to the narrow side canal where he'd moored the rowboat. He tossed Kaz's cane, and they clambered down. Kaz had been wise not to allow himself the use of his walking stick this night. If someone noticed a boy with a crow's head cane lurking around the office of Cornelis Smeet at an unusual hour, if an offhand mention of the fact somehow reached Van Eyck's ears, all their work would be for nothing. To get Inej back, they would need surprise on their side, and the Gemnin was not the type to leave anything to chance. Well, Matthias asked as the boat slid along the dark waters of the canal. Hold your tongue, Helvar. Words like to ride the water. Put yourself to use and help work the oars. Matthias fought the urge to snap his oars in half. Why was Kaz incapable of keeping a civil tongue? He gave orders as if he simply expected everyone to follow his commands. And he'd been twice as insufferable since Van Eyck had taken Inej. But Matthias wanted to get back to the Black Veil and Nina as fast as possible, so he did as he was bid, feeling his shoulders flex as the boat moved against the current. He put his mind to keeping track of the landmarks they passed, trying to remember street and bridge names. Though Matthias studied a map of the city every night, he had found knots of alleys and canals nearly impossible to untangle. He'd always prided himself on a good sense of direction, but this city had defeated it, and he frequently found himself cursing whatever mad hand had thought it wise to raise a city from a swamp and then arrange it without order or logic. Once they passed beneath Haven Bridge, he was relieved to find his surroundings becoming familiar again. Cass tipped his oars, steering them into murky waters of Beggar's Bend, where the canal widened and guided them into the shadows of Black Veil Island. They tucked the hold on. They tucked the boat in behind the drooping limbs of White Willow, and then picked their way up through the graves that dotted the steep bank. Black Veil was an eerie place, a miniature city of white marble mausoleums, many carved into the shapes of ships, their stone figureheads weeping as they cut across an invisible sea. Some bore the stamp of Gessen's coins of favors, others the 3 flying fishes of Kirch that Nina had indicated a member of the family had served in the government. A few were watched over by Ravkan's saints in flowing marble robes. There was no sign of Gel or his ash tree. Beardens would not want to be interred above the earth, where they could not take root. Almost all the mausoleums had fallen into disrepair, and many were little more than piles of slumped rock overgrown with vines and clusters of spring flowers. Matthias had been horrified at the idea of using a cemetery as a safe house, no matter how long it had been abandoned, but of course nothing was sacred to Kazbrecker. Why don't they use this place anymore? Matthias had asked when they'd taken over a vast tomb at the island's center as their hideout. Plague, Kaz replied. The first bad outbreak was more than 100 years ago, and the Merchant Council prohibited burial within city limits. Now, bodies have to be cremated. Not if you're rich, Jesper added. Then they take you to a cemetery in the country where your corpse can enjoy the fresh air. Matthias hated Blackvale, but he could acknowledge it had served them well. The rumors of hauntings kept squatters at bay, and the mist that surrounded the twisting willows and stone mass of the graves obscured the occasional lantern light. Of course, none of that would matter if people heard Nina and Jesper arguing at the top of their lungs. They must have returned to the island and left their gondel on the northern side. Nina's irritated voice floated over the graves, and Matthias felt a surge of relief, his steps quickening, eager for the sight of her. I don't think you're showing proper appreciation for what I just went through, Jesper was saying as he stomped through the cemetery. You spent a night at the tables losing someone else's money, Nina shot back. Isn't that essentially a holiday for you? Kaz knocked his cane hard against the gravestone, and they both went quiet, moving swiftly into fighting stances. Nina relaxed as soon as she caught sight of the 3 of them in the shadows. Oh, it's you. Yes, it's us. Kaz used his cane to herd them both toward the center of the island, And you would have heard us if you hadn't been busy shouting at each other. Stop gawking like you've never seen a girl in a dress before, Matthias. I wasn't gawking, Matthias said with as much dignity as he could muster. But for Jell's sake, what was he supposed to look at when Nina had irises tucked between everything? Be quiet, Brecker, Nina said. I like it when he gawks. How did the mission go? Matthias asked, trying to keep his eyes on her face. It was easy when he realized how tired she looked beneath the cosmetics she'd applied. She even took the arm he offered, leaning on him slightly as they made their way over the uneven terrain. The night had taken a toll. She shouldn't be traipsing around the barrel in scraps of silk. She should be resting. But the days until Van Eyck's deadline were dwindling, and Matthias knew Nina would allow herself no comfort until Inej was safe. It's not a mission, it's a job, Nina corrected, and it went splendidly. Yes, said Jesper, splendidly, except that my revolvers are currently collecting dust in the Club Cumulus safe. Smeet was afraid to walk home with them, the hopeless podge, just thinking of my babies in his sweaty hands. No one told you to wager them, said Kaz. You dealt me into a corner. How the hell else was I supposed to get Smeet to stay at the tables? Kuei poked his head out of his huge Kuei poked his head out of the huge stone tomb as they approached. What did I tell you? Kaz growled, pointing his cane at him. My Kirch isn't very good, protested Kuei. Don't run game on me, kid. It's good enough. Stay in the tomb. Kuei hung his head. Stay in the tomb, he repeated glumly. They followed the shoe boy inside. Matthias loathed this place. Why build such monuments to death? The tomb was constructed to look like an ancient cargo ship, its interior carved into a vast stone hull. It even had stained glass portholes that cast rainbows on the crypt floor in the late afternoon. According to Nina, the carvings of palm trees and snakes on the walls indicated the family had been spice traders. But they must have fallen on hard times or simply taken their dead elsewhere because only one of the vaults had a resident, and the narrow passages on either side of the main hall were equally empty. Nina pulled the pins from her hair, shook out the blonde wig, and tossed it on the table. They'd set in the mi- and tossed it on the table they set in the middle of the tomb. She slumped into a chair, rubbing her fingers along her scalp. So much better, she said with a happy sigh. But Matthias could not ignore the almost greenish cast to her skin. She was worse tonight. Either she'd run into trouble with Smeet or she'd simply overexerted herself. And yet, watching her, Matthias felt something in him ease. At least now she looked like Nina again, her brown hair in damp tangles, her eyes half shut. Was it normal to be fascinated by the way someone slouched? Guess what we saw on our way out of the lid? She asked. Jesper started digging through their food stores. Two shoe warships sitting in the harbor. She threw a hairpin at him. I was going to make them guess. Shoe? Asked Koei, returning to where he'd spread his notebooks over the table. Nina nodded. Cannons out, red flags flying. I talked to Specht earlier, said Kaz. The embassies are full up with diplomats and soldiers. Zemeni, Kalish, Ravkan. You think they know about Kuwait? Jesper asked. I think they know about Parem, said Kaz. Rumors, at least. And there were plenty of interested parties at the ice court to pick up gossip about Kuwait's liberation. He turned his gaze on Matthias. The Feridans are here too. They've got a whole contingent of Druskeli with them. Kuwait signed more. Kuwait signed. I'm getting annoyed with myself. Thank you for the hydrate, Eli. And I will stretch. A second. Better. Okay. Kuwait signed mournfully, and Jesper plunked down next to him, giving him a nudge with his shoulder. Isn't it nice to be wanted? Matthias said nothing. He did not like to think about the fact that his old friends, his old commander, might be only a few miles from them. He wasn't sorry for the things he'd done at the ice court, but that didn't mean he had made peace with them either. Wyland reached for one of the crackers Jesper had dumped on the table. It was still disconcerting to see him and Kuei in the same room. Nina's tailoring had been so successful that Matthias often had trouble telling them apart until they spoke. He wished one of them would do him the courtesy of wearing a hat. This is good for us, said Kaz. The Shu and the Fjordans don't know where to start looking for Kuei, and all those diplos making trouble at the Stad Hall are going to create some nice noise to distract Van Eck. What happened at Smeet's office? Nina asked. Did you find out where Van Eck is keeping her? I have a pretty good idea. We strike tomorrow at midnight. Is that enough time to prepare? Asked Wyland. It's all the time we have. We're not going to wait for an engraved invitation. What's your progress on the Weevil? Jesper's brow shot up. The Weevil? Weiler removed a small vial from his coat and set it down on the table. Matthias bent to peer at it. It looked like a bunch of pebbles. That's a weevil? He thought of weevils as pests that got into grain stores. Not a real weevil, said Wyland. It's a chemical weevil. It doesn't really have a name yet. You've got to give it a name, said Jesper. How else will you call it to dinner? Forget what it's called, Cass said. What matters is that this little vial is going to eat Van Eyck's bank accounts and his reputations. Wyland cleared his throat. Possibly. The chemistry is complicated. I was hoping would help. Nina said something to Kuei and Shu. He shrugged and looked away, lip jutting out slightly. Whether it was the recent death of his father, or the fact that he'd found himself stuck in a cemetery with a band of thieves, the boy had become increasingly sullen. Well, Jesper prodded. I have other interests, Kuei replied. Kaz's black gaze pinned Kuei like the tip of a dagger. I suggest rethinking your priorities. Jesper gave Kuei another nudge. That's Kaz's way of saying, help Wylan or I'll seal you up in one of these tombs and see how that suits your interest. Matthias was no longer sure what the shoeboy understood or didn't, but apparently he'd received the message. Kuei swallowed and nodded grudgingly. The power of negotiation, Jesper said, and shoved a cracker in his mouth. Wylan and the obliging Kuei will get the weevil working, Kaz continued. Once we have a Inej, we can move on Van Eyck's silos. Nina rolled her eyes. Good thing this is all about getting our money, and not about saving Inej. Definitely not about that. If you don't care about money, Nina dear, call it by its other names. Kruger, Scrub, Kaz's one true love. Freedom, security, retribution. You can't put a price on those things. No, I bet Jesper can. It's the price of the lien on his father's farm. The sharpshooter looked at the toes of his boots. What about you, Wylan? Can you put a price on a chance to walk away from Ketterdam and live your own life? And Nina, I suspect you and your Fjorda may want something more to subsist on than patriotism and longing glances. And Nej might have a number in mind, too. It's the price of a future, and it's Van Eyck's turn to pay. Matthias was not fooled. Kaz always spoke logic, but that didn't mean he always told the truth. The Wraith's life is worth more than that, said Matthias. To all of us. We get an edge, we get our money. It's as simple as that. Simple as that, said Nina. Did you know I'm next in line for the Fjordan throne? They call me Princess Isle of Engelsberg. There is no Princess of Engelsberg, said Matthias. It's a fishing town. Nina shrugged. If we're going to lie to ourselves, we might as well be grand about it. Kaz ignored her, spreading a map of the city over the table, and Matthias heard Wyland murmur to Jesper, why won't he just say he wants her back? You've met Kaz, right? But she's one of us. Jesper's brows rose again. One of us? Does that mean she knows the secret handshake? Does that mean you're ready to get a tattoo? He ran a finger up Wyland's forearm, and Wyland flushed a vibrant pink. Matthias couldn't help but sympathize with the boy. He knew what it was to be out of your depth, and he sometimes suspected they could forego all of Kaz's he knew what it was to be out of your depth, and he sometimes suspected they could forego all of Kaz's planning and simply let Jesper and Nina flirt the entirety of Ketterdam into submission. Wyland pulled his sleeve down self-consciously. And Nash is part of the crew. Just don't push it. Why not? Because the practical thing would be for Kaz to auction Kuwait to the highest bidder and forget about Inej entirely. He wouldn't, Wyland broke off abruptly, doubt creeping over his features. None of them really knew what Kaz would or wouldn't do. Sometimes Matthias wondered if even Kaz was sure. Okay, Kaz, said Nina, slipping off her shoes and wiggling her toes. Since this is about the almighty plan, how about you stop meditating over that map and tell us just what we're in for? I want you focused on what we have to do tomorrow night. After that, you'll get all the information you want. Really? Asked Nina, tugging at her corset. Pollen from one of the irises had scattered over her bare shoulder. Matthias had the overwhelming urge to brush it away with his lips. It's probably poisonous, he told himself sternly. Maybe you should take a walk. Van Eck promised us 30 million Kruger, said Kaz. That's exactly what we're going to take. With another 1 million for interest, expenses, and just because we can. Wyland broke a cracker in two. My father doesn't have 30 million Kruger lying around, even if you look at all his assets together. You should leave then, said Jesper. We only associate with the disgraced heirs of the very finest fortunes. Kaz stretched his bad leg out, flexing his foot slightly. If Van Eck had that kind of money on hand, we would have just robbed him instead of breaking into the ice court in the first place. He could only offer a reward that big because he claimed the merchant council was putting city funds toward it. What about that chest full of bills he brought to Velgaluk? Asked Jesper. Bunk, said Kaz, disgust in his voice. Probably quality counterfeits. So then how do we get the money? Rob the city? Rob the council? Jasper sat up straighter, hands drumming eagerly on the table. Hit 12 vaults in one night? Wyland shifted in his chair. Wyland shifted in his chair, and Matthias saw the disquiet in his expression. At least someone else in this band of miscreants was reluctant to keep committing crimes. No, said Kaz. We're going to make like merchants and let the market do the work for us. He leaned back, gloved hands resting on his crow's head cane. We're going to take Van Eyck's money, and then we're going to take his reputation. We're going to make sure he can never do business in Ketterdam or anywhere in Kerch ever again. And what happens to Quay? Asked Nina. Once the job is done, Quay and any other convicts, Grisha and disinherited youths who may or may not have prices on their head can lie low in the southern colonies. Jesper frowned. Where will you be? Right here. I've still got plenty of business that requires my attention. Though Kaz's tone was easy, Matthias heard the dark anticipation in his words. He had often wondered how people survived the city, but it was possible Ketterdam would not survive Kazbrecker. Wait a minute, said Nina. I thought Kuwait was going to Ravka. Why would you think that? When you sold your Crow Club shares to Pekka Rollins, you asked him to send a message to the Ravkan capital. We all heard it. I thought it was a request for aid, said Matthias, not an invitation to bargain. They had never discussed giving Kuwait to Ravka. Kaz considered them with some amusement. It was neither. Let's just hope Rollins is Kaz considered them with some amusement. It was neither. Let's just hope Rollins is as gullible as you two. It was a decoy, Nina moaned. You were just keeping Rollins busy. I wanted Pekka Rollins preoccupied. Hopefully, he has his people trying to chase down our Ravkan contacts. They should prove difficult to find, given that they don't exist. Koei cleared his throat. I'd prefer to go to Ravka. I prefer to pair. I'd prefer a pair of sable-lined swimming trunks," said Jesper. "But we can't always get what we want." A furrow appeared between Kuei's brows. The limits to his understanding of Kerch had apparently been reached and surpassed. "I prefer to go to Ravka," he repeated more firmly. Kaz's flat black gaze fastened on Kuei and held. Kuei squirmed nervously. "Why is he looking at me this way?" "Kaz is wondering if he should keep you alive," said Jesper. Terrible, terrible for the nerves. I recommend deep breathing. Maybe a tonic." "Jesper, stop," said Wylan. "Both of you need to relax." Jesper patted Quay's hands. "We're not going to let him put you in the ground." Kaz raised a brow. "Let's not make any promises just yet." "Come on, Kaz. We didn't go to all the trouble to save Quay just to make him warm food." "Why do you want to go to Ravka?" Nina asked, unable to hide her eagerness. "We never agreed to that," Matthias said. He did not want to argue about this, especially not with Nina. They were supposed to set Kuei loose to live an anonymous life in Novia Zem, not hand him over to Fjord, his greatest enemy. Nina shrugged. "Maybe we need to rethink our options." Kuei spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "It's safer there. For Grisha. For me. I don't want to hide. I want to train." Kuei touched the notebooks in front of him. "My father's work can help find." He hesitated, exchanged a few words with Nina. "An antidote for Perem." Nina clasped her hands together, beaming. Jesper tipped back farther into his chair. I think Nina may be about to burst into song. An antidote. Was that what Kuei was describing? Was that what Kuei had been scribbling about in his notebooks? The prospect of something that might neutralize the powers of Perem was appealing. And yet Matthias couldn't help but be wary. "To put this knowledge in the hands of one nation," he began. But Kuei interrupted. "My father brought this drug into the world. Even without me, what I know, it will be made again." "You're saying someone else is going to solve the riddle of Perem?" Matthias asked. Was there truly no hope this abomination could be contained? Sometimes scientific Sometimes scientific discoveries are like that, said Wyland. Once people know something is possible, the pace of new findings increases. After that, it's like trying to get a swarm of hornets back into their nest. "Do you really think an antidote is possible?" Nina asked. "I don't know," said Kuei. "My father was a fabricator. I am just an infernee." "You're our chemist, Wyland," said Nina hopefully. "What do you think?" Wyland shrugged. "Maybe. Not all poisons have an antidote." Jesper snorted. That's why that's why we call him Wyland Van Sunshine. "In Ravka, there are more talented fabricators," Kuei said. "They could help." Nina nodded emphatically. "It's true. Genghis Safin knows poisons like no one else. And David Kotsik develops all kinds of new weapons for King Nikolai." She glanced at Matthias. "And other things too. Nice things. Very peaceable." Matthias shook his head. "This isn't a decision to be made lightly." Kuei's jaw set. "I would prefer to go to Ravka." "See," said Nina. "No, I do not," said Matthias. "We can't just hand such a prize over to Ravka. He's a person, not a prize, and he wants to go." "Do we all get to do what we want now?" asked Jesper. "Because I have a list." There was a long, tense pause. Then Kaz ran a gloved thumb over the crease of his trousers and said, "Nina, love, translate for me. I want to make sure Kuei and I understand each other." "Kaz," she said warningly. Kaz shifted forward and rested his hands on his knees, a kind older brother offering some friendly advice. "I think it's important that you understand the changes in your circumstances. Van Eck knows Van Eck knows the first place you'd go for sanctuary would be Ravka, so any ship bound for its shores is going to be searched from top to bottom. The only tailors powerful enough to make you look like someone else are in Ravka, unless Nina wants to take another dose of Perem. Matthias growled. Which is unlikely, Kaz conceded. Now, I assume you don't want me to cart you back to Fjerda or the Shuhan. It was clear Nina had finished the translation when Kuei yelped, No! Then your choices are Novia Zem and the southern colonies, but the Kirch presence in the colonies is far lower. Also, the weather is better, if you're partial to that kind of thing. You're a stolen painting, Kuei. Too recognizable to sell in the open market. Too valuable to leave lying around. You are worthless to me. I'm not translating that, Nina snapped. Then translate this. My sole concern is keeping you away from Jan Van Eck, and if you want me to start exploring more definite options, a bullet is a lot cheaper than putting you on a ship to the southern colonies. Nina did translate, though haltingly. Kuei responded in Shu. She hesitated. He says you're cruel. I'm pragmatic. If I were cruel, I'd give him a eulogy instead of a conversation. So, Kuei, you'll go to the southern colonies, and when the heat has died down, you can find your way to Ravka or Matthias's grandmother's house for all I care. Leave my grandmother out of this, Matthias said. Nina translated, and at last Kuei gave a stiff nod. Though Matthias had gotten his way, the dejection on Nina's face left a hollow feeling in his chest. Kaz checked his watch. Now that we're in agreement, you all know what your responsibilities are. There are a lot of things that can go wrong between now and tomorrow night. So talk through the plan and then talk through it again. We only have one shot at this. Van Eck will set up a perimeter. Van Eck will set up a perimeter. He'll have her heavily guarded, said Matthias. That's right. He has more guns, more men, and more resources. All we have is a prize, and we're not going to squander it. A soft scraping sounded from outside. Instantly, they were on their feet and ready, even Kuei. But a moment later, Roddy and Speck slipped into the tomb. Matthias released a breath and returned his rifle to where he kept it, always within arm's reach. What business? Asked Kaz. The Shu have set up at their embassy, said Speck. Everyone on the lid is talking about it. Numbers? 40, give or take, said Roddy, kicking the mud from his boots. Heavily armed, but still operating under diplomatic flags. No one knows exactly what they want. We do, said Jesper. I didn't get too near the slat, said Roddy, but Prohaskell's antsy, and he's not being quiet about it. Without you around, work's piling up for the old man. Now there are rumors you're back in the city and had a run with a merch. Oh, and there was some kind of attack at one of the harbors a few days ago. Bunch of sailors killed, harbor master's office turned into a pile of splinters, but no one knows details. Matthias saw Cass's expression darken. He was hungry for more information. Matthias knew the Demjin had other reasons for going after Inej, but the fact remained that, without her, their ability to gather intelligence had been severely compromised. All right, said Kaz, but no one's contacted us to the but all right, said Kaz, but no one's connected us to the raid of the Ice Court or Perem. Not that I heard, said Roddy. Nope, said Speck. Wyland looked surprised. That means Pekka Rollins hasn't talked. Give him time, said Kaz. He knows we have Kuei stashed somewhere. The letter to Ravka will only keep him chasing his tail for so long. Jesper tapped his fingers restlessly on his thigh. Has anyone noticed this whole city is looking for us, mad at us, or wants to kill us? So, said Kaz. Well, usually it's just half the city. Jesper might joke, but Matthias wondered if any of them really understood the powers arraying against them. Fjerda, the Shuhan, Novia Zem, the Kalish, the Kirch. These were not rival gangs or angry business partners. These were nations, determined to protect their people and secure their futures. There's more, said Specht. Matthias, you're dead. Pardon? Matthias's Kirch was good, but perhaps there were still gaps. You were shanked in the Hellgate infirmary. The room went quiet. Jesper sat down heavily. Muzin is dead? Muzin. Matthias could not place a name. He took your place in Hellgate, Jesper said, so you could join the Ice Court job. Matthias remembered the fight with the wolves. Nina standing in the cell, the prison break. Nina had covered a member of the dregs in false sores and given him a fever to make sure he was quarantined and kept from the larger prison population. Muzin. Matthias should not have forgotten such a thing. I thought you said you had a contact in the infirmary, said Nina. To keep him sick, not to keep him safe. Kaz's face was grim. It was a hit. The Fjerdan, said Nina. Matthias folded his arms. That's not possible. Why not? Nina said. We know there are Driskelli here. If they came to town looking for you and made noise at the stat hall, they would have been told you were in Hellgate. No, said Matthias. They wouldn't resort to such an underhanded tactic, hiring a killer, murdering someone in his sick bed. But even as he said the words, Matthias wasn't sure he believed them. Jarl Brum and his officers had done worse without a twinge of conscience. Big, blond, and blind, said Jesper, the Fjerdan way. He died in my stead, Matthias thought, and I didn't even recognize his name. Did Muzzin have a family? Matthias asked at last. Just the dregs, said Kaz. No mourners, Nina replied. No mourners, Nina murmured. No funerals, Matthias replied quietly. How does it feel to be dead? Asked Jesper. The merry light had gone from his eyes. Matthias had no answer. The knife that had killed Muzzin had been meant for Matthias, and the Fjordans might well be responsible. The Druskeli, his brothers. They'd wanted him to die without honor, murdered in an infirmary bed. It was a death fit for a traitor. It was the death had earned. Now Matthias owed Muzzin a blood debt, but how would he ever pay it? What will they do with the body? He asked. It's probably already ashes on the Reaper's barge, said Kaz. There's something else, said Roddy. Someone's kicking up dust looking for Jesper. His creditors will have to wait, said Kaz, and Jesper winced. No, Roddy said with a shake of his head. A man showed up at the university, Jesper. No, Roddy said with a shake of his head. A man showed up at the university. Jesper, he claims he's your father. I don't know why I'm getting so tongue tied tonight. Hold on. How I thunked my elbow on the desk as I did that. It happens, yeah. I know, I'm still annoyed though. Ugh. Loki, I think I'm starting to get vertigo a little bit, so this might be a shorter night than I hoped it would be. But we'll see. I mean, obviously we're not gonna go till late like yesterday, but I was hoping to go till like 11:30. We'll see. Chapter 4, Inej. Inej lay on her belly, arms extended in front of her, wriggling like a worm through the dark. Despite the fact that she'd been as good as starving herself, the vent was still a tight fit. She couldn't see where she was going. She just kept moving forward, pulling herself along by her fingertips. She'd woken someone after the fight on Velgaluk. Sorry. She'd woken sometime after the fight on Velgaluk, with no sense of how long she'd been unconscious, and no idea where she'd been. She remembered plummeting from a great height as one of Van Eck's squallers dropped her, only to be snatched up by another, arms like steel bands around her, the air buffeting her face, gray sky all around, and then pain exploding over her skull. The next thing she knew, she was awake, head pounding in the dark. Her hands and ankles were bound, and she could feel a blindfold tied across her face. For a moment, she was 14, being tossed into the hold of a slaver ship, frightened and alone. She forced herself to breathe. Wherever she was, she felt no ship's sway, heard no creak of sails. The ground was solid beneath her. Where would Van Eyck have brought her? She could be in a warehouse, someone's home. She might not even be in Kirch anymore. It didn't matter. She was in Ejgafa, and she would not quiver like a rabbit in a snare. Wherever I am, I just have to get out. She'd managed to nudge her blindfold down by scraping her face against the wall. The room was pitch black, and all she could hear in the silence was her own rapid breathing as panic seized her again. She'd leashed it by controlling her breath, in through the nose, out of the mouth, letting her mind turn to prayer as her saints gathered around her. She imagined them checking the ropes at her wrists, rubbing life into her hands. She did not tell herself she wasn't afraid. Long ago, after a bad fall, her father had explained that only fools were fearless. We meet fear, he said. We greet the unexpected visitor and listen to what he has to tell us. When fear arrives, something is about to happen. Inej intended to make something happen. She'd ignored the ache in her head and forced herself to inch around the room, estimating its dimensions. Then she used the wall to push to her feet and felt along it, shuffling and hopping, searching for any doors or windows. When she'd heard footsteps approaching, she'd dropped to the ground, but she hadn't had time to get her blindfold back in place. From then on, the guards tied it tighter, but that didn't matter, because she'd found the vent. All she needed then was a way out of her ropes. Kaz could have managed it in the dark and probably underwater. The only thorough look she got at the room where she was being held was during meals, when they brought in a lantern. She'd hear keys turning in a series of locks, the door swinging open, the sound of a tray being placed on the table. A moment later, the blindfold would be gently lifted from her face. Bahan was never rough or abrupt. It wasn't in his nature. In fact, she suspected it was beyond the capabilities of his manicured musician's hands. There was never any cutlery on the tray, of course. Vanek was wise enough not to trust her with so much as a spoon. But Inej had taken advantage of each unblindfolded moment to study every inch of the barren room, seeking clues that might help her to assess her location and plan her escape. There wasn't much to go on. A concrete floor marked by nothing but the pile of blankets she'd been given to burrow into at night. Walls lined with empty shelves. The table and chair where she took her meals. There were no windows, and the only hint that they might still be near Ketterdam was the damp trace of salt in the air. Bahan would untie her wrists, then bind them again in front of her that she could eat. Though once she discovered the vent, she'd only picked at her food, eating enough to keep up her strength and nothing more. Still, when Bahana and the guards had brought her tray tonight, her stomach had growled audibly at the smell of soft sausages and porridge. She had been woozy with hunger, and when she tried to sit down, she tipped the tray from its perch on the table, smashing the white ceramic mug and bowl. Her dinner slopped to the floor in a steaming heap of savory mush and broken crockery, and she landed ungracefully next to it, barely avoiding a face full of porridge. Vaughn had shaken his dark, sulky head. "You are weak because you don't eat. Mr. Van X says I must force feed you if necessary." "Try," she said, looking up at him from the floor and baring her teeth. "You'll have trouble teaching piano without all your fingers." But Bahan had only laughed, white grin flashing. He and one of the guards had helped her back into the chair, and he'd sent for another tray. Van Eck could not have chosen her jailer better. Bahan was Suli, only a few years older than Inej, with thick black hair that curled around his collar and black gem eyes framed by lashes long enough to swat flies. He told her he was a music teacher endangered to Van Eck, and Inej wondered that the merch would bring a boy like that into the household, given that his new wife was less than half his own age. Van Eck was either very confident or very stupid. He double-crossed Kaz, she reminded herself. He's leaning heavily into the stupid column. Once the mess had been cleaned up by a guard, Bahan didn't stoop to such work, and a new meal procured, he'd leaned against the wall to watch her eat. She'd scooped up a lump of porridge with her fingers, allowing herself only a few awkward bites. "You must eat more than that," Bahan chided. "If you make yourself a bit more obliging, if you answer his questions, you'll find Van Eck is a reasonable man." "A reasonable liar, cheat, and kidnapper," she said, then cursed herself for replying. Bahan couldn't hide his pleasure. They had the same routine at each meal. She picked at her food. He made small talk, peppering his chatter with pointed questions about Kaz and the dregs. Every time she spoke, he considered it a victory. Unfortunately, the less she ate, the weaker she got, and the harder it was to keep her wits about her. "Given the company you keep, I think lying and cheating would be points in Mr. Van Eck's favor." "Chevrati," Inej said distinctly. "No, nothing." She'd called Kaz that on more than one occasion. She thought of she thought of Jesper toying with his guns, Nina squeezing the life from a man with the flick of a wrist, Cass picking a lock in his black gloves. Thugs, thieves, murderers, and all worth more than 1,000 Jan Van X. Then where are they? The question tore at some hastily stitched seam inside of her. Where is Kaz? She didn't want to look at that question too closely. Above everything else, Kaz was practical. Why would he come for her when he could walk away from Van Eck with the most valuable hostage in the world? Mahan wrinkled his nose. "Let's not speak Suli. It makes me maudlin." He wore tapered silk trousers and an elegantly cut coat. Pinned to his lapel, a golden lyre crowned with laurel leaves and a small ruby indicated both his profession and the house of his indenture. Inej knew she shouldn't continue to talk with him, but she was still a gatherer of secrets. "What instruments do you teach?" she said. "Harp, pianoforte, also flute, and voice for ladies." "And how does Alice Van X sing?" Bahan gave her a lazy grin. "Most prettily under my instruction. I could teach you to make all manner of pleasing sounds." Inez rolled her eyes. He was just like the boy she'd grown up with, a head full of nonsense and a mouth full of easy charm. "I am bound in facing the prospect of torture or worse. Are you actually flirting with me?" Sorry. I know my eyes are about to go in a moment. I think I need to turn off my heater. I will be right back, Starlings. Sorry. Welcome back from the ad, Starlings. I was checking. I was checking who's live. All right. Let me. I'll continue. It might have to be an early night. Sorry, Starlings, but we'll see. Um, I'm hoping to at least finish this chapter or the next. We'll see. If your vertigo is getting worse, go rest. It's it's slowly getting better, but I'm also like, um, it's okay. It's fine. It's getting better, but it is making me like sleepy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Bahantisk. Mr. Van Eck and your Mr. Brecker will reach an arrangement. Van Eck is a businessman. From what I understand, he is simply protecting his interests. I cannot imagine he was a resort to torture. Were you not the one? Were you not the? Were you the one tied up and blindfolded every night? Your imagination might not fail you so completely. And if Bahan had no Kaz at all, he wouldn't be so certain of an exchange. In the long hours she was left alone, Inez tried to rest and put her mind to escape, but inevitably, her thoughts turned to Kaz and the others. Van Eck wanted to trade her for Kuei Yilbo, the shoe boy they had stolen from the deadliest fortress in the world. He was the only person who had a hope of recreating his father's work on the drug known as Jertaparem, and the price of this ransom would give Kaz all he had ever wanted, all the money and prestige he needed to take his rightful place among the bosses of Barrel, and the chance at revenge on Pekka Rollins for the death of his brother. The facts lined up one after another, an army of doubts assembled against the hope she tried to keep steady inside her. Kaz's course was obvious: ransom Kuei, take the money, find himself a new spider to scale the walls of the barrel, and steal secrets for him. And hadn't she told him she planned on leaving Ketterdam as soon as they were paid? Stay with me. Had he meant it? What value did her life carry in the face of this reward Kuei might garner? Nina would never let Kaz abandon her. She'd fight with everything she had to free Inej, even if she was still in the grips of Harem. Matthias would stand by her with that great heart full of honor. And Jesper would never do Inej harm. But he needed money badly, if he wouldn't want his father to lose his livelihood. He would do his best, but that might not necessarily mean what was best for her. Besides, without Kaz, were any of them a match for Van Eck's ruthlessness and resources? I am, Inej told herself. I may not have Kaz's devious mind, but I am a dangerous girl. Van Eck had sent Bahan to her every day, and he'd been nothing but amiable and pleasant, even as he'd prodded her for the locations of Kaz's safe houses. She suspected that Van Eck didn't come himself because he knew Kaz would be keeping a close eye on his movements. Or maybe he thought she'd be more vulnerable to a silly boy with a wily merch than a wily merch. But tonight something had changed. Bahan usually left when Nejm had made it clear she would eat no more. A parting smile, a small bow, and away he went. Duty dispatched until the following morning. Tonight he had lingered. Instead of taking his cue to vanish when she had used her bound hands to nudge away her dish, he'd said, "When did you see your family last?" A new approach. "Has Van Eck offered you some reward if you can extract information from me?" It was just a question. "I am just a captive. Did he threaten you with punishment?" Bahan glanced at the guards and said quietly, "Van Eck could bring you back to your family. He could pay off your contract with Perhaskell. It is well within his means." "Was this your idea or your master's?" "Why does it matter?" Bahan asked. There was an urgency in his voice that pricked at Inej's defenses. When fear arrives, something is about to happen. But was he afraid of Eck or afraid of her? You can walk away from the dregs and Perhaskell and that horrid Kazbrecker free and clear. Van Eck could give you transport to Ravka, money to travel. An offer or a threat? Could Van Eck have found her mother and father? The Suli were not easy to track, and they would be wary of strangers asking questions. But what if Van Eck had sent men claiming to have knowledge of a lost girl? A girl who had vanished one chilly dawn as if the tide had reached up to the shore to claim her. "What does Van Eck know about my family?" she asked, anger rising. "He knows you're far from home. He knows the terms of your indenture with the menagerie. Then he knows I was a slave. Will he have Tante Helene arrested?" "I don't think. Of course not. Van Eck doesn't care that I was bought and sold like a bolt of cotton. He's just looking for leverage." But what Bahan said next took Inej by surprise. "Did your mother make skillet bread?" She frowned. Of course. It was a Stuli staple. Inej could have made skillet bread in her sleep. "With rosemary?" "Dill, when we had it." She knew what Bahan was doing, trying to make her think of home. But she was so hungry, and the memory was so strong that her stomach growled anyway. She could see her mother damping the fire, see her flipping the bread with quick pinches of her fingers, smell the dough cooking over the ashes. "Your friends are not coming," said Bahan. "It's time to think of your own survival. You could be home with your family by summer's end. Van Eck can help if you let him." Every alarm inside Inej had sounded danger. The play was too obvious. Beneath Bahan's charm, his dark eyes, his easy promises, there was fear. And yet, amid the clamor of suspicion, she could hear the soft chiming of another bell, the sound of what if. What if she let herself be comforted, gave up the pretense of being beyond the things she'd lost? What if she simply let Van Eck put her on a ship and send her home? She could taste the skillet bread, warm from the pan, and see her mother's dark braid twined with ribbons, strands of silk the color of ripe persimmons. But Inej knew better than that. She had learned from the best. Better terrible truths than kind lies. Cass had never offered her happiness, and she didn't trust the men promising to serve it up right now. Her suffering had not been for nothing. Her saints had brought her to Ketterdam for a reason: a ship to hunt slavers, a mission to give meaning to all she'd been through. She would not betray that purpose or her friends for some dream of the past. She hissed at Bahan, an animal sound that made him flinch backward. "Tell your master to honor his old deals before he starts making new ones," she said. "Now leave me alone." Bahan had scurried away like the well-dressed rat he was, but Inej knew it was time to go. Bahan's new insistence could mean nothing good for her. "I have to get out of this trap," she thought, "before this creature lures me with memories and sympathy." Maybe Kaz and the others were coming for her, but she didn't intend to wait around and see. Once Bahan and the guards had left, she slipped the shard of broken bowl from where she had hidden it beneath the ropes around her ankles, and set to work. Weak and wobbly as she'd felt when Bahan arrived with that heavenly smelling bowl of mush, she'd only pretended to swoon so that she could deliberately knock her tray off the table. If Van Eyck had really done his research, he would have warned Bahan that the wraith did not fall. Certainly not a clumsy heap on the floor where she could easily tuck a sharp piece of crockery between her bonds. After what seemed like a lifetime of sawing and scraping and blooding her fingertips on the shard's edge, she'd finally severed her ropes and freed her hands, then untied her ankles and felt her way to the vent. Bahan and the guards wouldn't be back until morning. That gave her the whole night to escape the place and get as far away as she possibly could. The passage was a miserably tight fit, the air inside musty with smells. She couldn't quite with musty with smells she couldn't quite identify. The dark so complete she might as well have kept her blindfold on. She had no idea where the vent might lead. It could run for a few more. Fuck, my eyes are. Hold on. Well, sorry. I'm gonna put eye drops in, so hold on. I'm here, but I feel like it's awkward to watch, so. Sorry, starlings. But my eyes are itching, so. Found all the stickers and that. All right, give me a second. I'm crying. I'm so emotional. Just my allergies kicking my ass today. Whew, okay. After what seemed like a lifetime of sawing and scraping and blooding her fingertips on the shard's edge, she'd finally severed her ropes and freed her hands, then untied her ankles and felt her way to the vent. Bahan and the guards wouldn't be back until morning. That gave her the whole night to escape this place and get as far away as she possibly could. The passage was admittedly what the passage was a miserably tight fit, the air inside musty with smells she couldn't quite identify. The dark so complete she might as well have kept her blindfold on. She had no idea where the vent might lead. It could run for a few more feet or for half a mile. She needed to be gone by morning, or they'd find the grating that covered the vent loosened on its hinges and know exactly where she was. Good luck getting me out, she thought grimly. She doubted any of Van Eyck's guards could squeeze inside the air shaft. They have to find some kitchen boy and grease him down with lard. She inched forward. How far had she gone? Every time she took a deep breath, it felt like the air shaft was tightening around her ribs. For all she knew, she could be atop a building. She might pop her head out on she might pop her head out the other side only to find a busy Ketterdam street far below. And Nesh could contend with that. But if the shaft just ended, if it was walled up on the other side, she'd have to squirm backward the entire distance and hope to refasten her rope so that her captors wouldn't know that what she'd done. Impossible. There could be no dead ends tonight. Faster, she told herself, sweat beading on her brow. It was hard not to imagine the building compressing around her, its walls squeezing the breath from her lungs. She couldn't make a real plan until she reached the end of the tunnel, until she knew just how far she'd have to go to evade Van Eyck's men. Then she felt it, the barest gust of air brushing against her damp forehead. She whispered a quick prayer of thanks. There must be some kind of opening up ahead. She sniffed, searching for a hint of coal smoke or the wet green fields of a country town. Cautiously, she wiggled forward until her fingers made contact with the slats of the vent. There was no light trickling through, which she supposed was a good thing. The room she was about to drop into must be unoccupied. Saints, what if she was in Van Eyck's mansion? What if she was about to land on a sleeping merch? She listened for some human sound. Snores, deep breathing. Nothing. She wished for her knives, for the comforting weight of them in her palms. Sorry. Bella's fighting, getting her medication, I think. She wished for her knives, for the comforting weight of them in her palms. Did Van Eyck still have them in his possession? Had he sold them off? Tossed them into the sea? She named the blades anyways. Peter, Maria, Anastasia, Lisabetta, Saint Vladimir, Saint Elena, and found courage in each whispered word. Then she jiggled the vent and gave it a hard shove. It flew open, but instead of swinging on its hinges, it came completely loose. She tried to grab it, but it slid past her fingertips and clattered to the floor. Inej waited, heart pounding. A minute passed in silence. Another. No one came. The room was empty. Maybe the whole building was empty. Van Eyck wouldn't have left her unguarded, so his men must be stationed outside. If that was the case, she knew slipping past them would present little challenge, and at least now she knew roughly how far away the floor was. There was no graceful way to accomplish what came next. Okay. She slid down headfirst, gripping the wall. Then, when she was more than halfway out and her body began to tip, she let momentum carry her forward, curling into a ball and tucking her arms over her head to protect her skull and neck as she fell. The impact was fairly painless. The floor was hard concrete like the floor of her cell, but she rolled as she struck and came up against what seemed to be the back of something solid. She pulled herself to her feet, hands exploring whatever she banged into. It was upholstered in velvet. As she moved along, she felt another identical object next to it. Seats, she realized. I'm in a theater. There were plenty of music halls and theaters in the barrel. Could she be so close to home? Or maybe one of the respectable opera houses of the lid? She moved slowly, hands out before her, until she reached a wall at what she thought was the back of the theater. She groped along it, seeking a door, a window, even another vent. Finally, her fingers hooked over a door frame and her hands wrapped around the knob. It wouldn't budge. Locked. She gave it a tentative rattle. The room flooded with light. Inez shrank back against the door, squinting in the sudden brightness. If you wanted a tour, Miss Gaffa, you might simply have asked, said Jan van Eyck. He stood on the stage at the he stood on the stage of the decrepit theater, his black mercer's suit cut in severe lines. The theater's green velvet seats were moth-eaten. The curtains bracketing the stage hung in shreds. No one had bothered to take down the set from the last play. It looked like a child's terrified vision of a surgeon's operating room. Oversized saws and mallets hanging from the walls, and Nash recognized it as the set for The Madman and the Doctor, one of the short plays from the Comedy Brute. Guards were stationed around the room, and Bahan stood beside Van Eyck, wringing his elegant hands. Had the vent been left open in an attempt had been left open to tempt her? Had Van Eyck been toying with her all along? Bring her here, Van Eyck told the guards. Inez didn't hesitate. She sprang on the narrow back of the nearest theater seat and then raced towards the stage, leaping from row to row as the guards tried to scramble over the seats. She vaulted on the stage, past the startled Van Eyck, neatly skirting two more guards and seized one of the stage ropes, shinning up its length, praying it would hold her weight until she made it to the top. She could hide in the rafters, find a way to the roof. Cut her down, Van Eyck called, his voice calm. Inez climbed higher, faster. But seconds later she saw a face above her, one of Van Eyck's guards, a knife in his hand.
He slashed through the rope. It gave way and Ash fell to the floor, softening her knees to take the impact. Before she could right herself, three guards were on her, holding her in place. Really, Miss Gaffa, Van Eyck chided. We're well aware of your gifts. Did you think I wouldn't take precautions? He did not wait for an answer. You are not going to find your way out of this without my help or Mr. Brecker's. As he does not seem to be making an appearance, perhaps you should consider a change in alliance. Inej said nothing. Van Eyck tucked his hands behind his back. It was strange to look at him and see the ghost of Wyland's face. The city is awash in rumors of Prem. A delegation of Feared and Druskeli has arrived in the embassy sector. Today, the Shu sailed two warships into their harbor. I gave Brecker 7 days to broker a trade for your safety, but they are all looking for Kuei Yelbo, and it is imperative that I get him out of the city before they find him. Two Shu warships. That was what had changed. Van Eck was out of time. Had known it, or simply sensed the difference in his master's mood? I'd hoped Bahan might prove good for something other than bettering my wife's talents at the pianoforte, Vanek continued. But it seems you and I must now come to an arrangement. Where is where is Kazbrecker keeping the boy? How could I possibly know that? You must know the locations of the Dreg safe houses. Brecker does nothing without preparation. He'll have warrants to hide in all over the city. If you know him well, then you know he'd never keep Koi somewhere that I could lead you to him. I don't believe that. I can't help what you do or don't believe. Your shoe scientist is probably long gone already. Word would have reached me. My spies are everywhere. Clearly not everywhere. Bahan's lips quirked. Vanek shook his head wearily. Get her on the table. Inaj knew it was pointless to struggle, but she did anyway. It was fight or give in to the terror that rushed through her as the guards hefted her onto the table and pinned down her limbs. Now she saw now she saw one of the prop tables was set with instruments that looked nothing like the oversized mallets and saws hanging from the walls. They were real surgeon's tools, scalpels and saws and clamps that gleamed with sinister intent. You are the Wraith, Miss Gaffa, Legend of the Barrel. You've gathered the secrets of judges, councilmen, thieves, and killers alike. I doubt there is anything in the city you do not know. You will tell me the locations of Mr. Brecker's safe houses now. I can't tell you what I don't know, Vanek sighed. Remember that I have tried to treat you with civility. He turned to one of the guards, a heavy set man with a sharp blade of a nose. I'd prefer this didn't go on too long. Do what you think is best. The guard let his hand hover over the table of instruments as if deciding which cruelty would be most efficient. Inej felt her courage wobble, her breath coming in panic gasps. When fear arrives, something is about to happen. Bahan leaned over her, face pale, eyes full of concern. Please tell him. Surely Brecker isn't worth being scarred or maimed. Tell him what you know. All I know is that men like you don't deserve the air they breathe. Bahan looked stung. I've been nothing but kind to you. I'm not some sort of monster. No, you're the man who sits idly by, congratulating yourself on your decency, while the monster eats his fill. At least a monster has teeth and a spine. That isn't fair. And Nash couldn't believe the softness of this creature, that he would bid for her approval in this moment. If you still believe in fairness, then you've led a very lucky life. Get out of the monster's way, Bahan. Let's get this over with. The blade-nosed guard stepped forward. Something gleamed in his hand. Inez reached for a place of stillness inside of herself, the place that had allowed her to endure a year of the menagerie, a year of nights marked by pain and humiliation, of days counted in beatings and worse. Go on, she urged, and her voice was steel. Wait, said Van Eyck. He was studying Inej as if he was reading a ledger, trying to make the figures line up. He cocked his head to one side and said, Break her legs. Inej felt her courage fracture. She began to thrash, trying to get free of the guard's hold. Ah, said Van Eyck. That's what I thought. The blade-nosed guard selected a heavy length of pipe. No, said Van Eyck. I don't want it to be a clean break. Use the mallet. Shatter the bone. His voice hovered above her, his eyes a bright, clear blue. Wyland's eyes, but devoid of any of Wyland's kindness. No one will be able to put you back together again, Miss Gaffa. Maybe you can earn your way out of your contract by begging for pennies on East Stave, and then crawl home to the slat every night, assuming Brecker still gives you a room there. Don't! She didn't know if she was pleading with Van Eyck or herself. She didn't know who she hated more in this moment. The guard took up a steel mallet. Inej writhed on the table, her body coated in sweat. She could smell her own fear. Don't, she repeated. Don't! The blade nosed noticed the blade nosed guard tested the mallet's weight in his hands. Van Eyck nodded. The guard lifted it in a smooth arc. Inej watched the mallet rise and reach its apex, light glinting off its white head, the flat face of a dead moon. She heard the crackle of the campfire, thought of her mother's hair twined with persimmon silk. He'll never trade if you break me, she screamed, the words tearing loose from some deep place inside her, her voice raw and undefended. I'll be no use to him any more. Van Eyck held up a hand. The mallet fell. and Nash felt it brush against her trousers as the impact shattered the surface of the table, a hair's breadth from her calf, the entire corner collapsing beneath the force. My leg, she thought, shuddering violently. That would have been my leg. There was a metallic taste in her mouth. She'd bitten her tongue. Saints protect me. Saints protect me. You make an interesting argument, Van Eyck said meditatively. He tapped a finger against his lips, thinking. Ponder your loyalties, Miss Gaffa. Tomorrow night I may not be so merciful. Inez could not control her shaking. I'm going to cut you open, she vowed silently. I'm going to excavate that pathetic excuse of a heart from your chest. It was an evil thought, a vile thought, but she couldn't help it. Would her saints sanction such a thing? Could forgiveness come if she killed not to survive, but because she burned with living, luminous hatred? I don't care, she thought as her body spasmed and the guards lifted her trembling form from the table. I'll do penance for the rest of my days if it means I get to kill him. They dragged her back to her room through the lobby of the dilapidated theater and down a hall to what she now knew must be an old equipment room. They bound her hands and feet again. Bahan moved to place the blindfold over her eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know he intended I. Kadema Mehim. Bahan flinched. Don't say that. The Suli were a close people, loyal. They had to be, in a world where they had no land and where they were so very few. And Nej's teeth were chattering, but she forced out the words. You are forsaken. As you have turned your back on me, so will they turn their backs on you. It was the worst of Suli denunciations. One that It was the worst of Suli denunciations. One that forbade you the welcome of your ancestors in the next world and doomed your spirit to wander without a home. Bahan paled. I don't believe any of that. You will. He secured the blindfold around her head. She heard the door close. And Nej lay on her side, her hip and her shoulder digging into the hard floor, and waited for the tremors to pass. In her early days at the menagerie, she'd believed someone would come for her. Her family would find her, an officer of the law, a hero from one of the stories her mother used to tell. Men had come, but not to set her free, and eventually, her hope had withered like leaves beneath a too bright sun, replaced by a bitter bud of resignation. Kaz had rescued her from that hopelessness, and their lives had been a series of rescues ever since, a string of deaths that they had never tallied as they saved each other again and again. Lying in the dark, she realized that for all her doubts, she'd believed he would rescue her once more, that he would put aside his greed and his demons and come for her. Now she wasn't so sure, because it was not just the sense in the words he'd spoken that had stilled Van Eyck's hand, but the truth she'd heard in her own voice. He'll never trade if you break me. She could not pretend those words had been conjured by strategy or even animal cunning. The magic they'd worked had been born of belief, an ugly enchantment. Tomorrow night I may not be so merciful. Had tonight been an exercise meant to frighten her, or would Van Eyck return to carry out his threats? And if Kaz did come, how much of her would be left? Okay. And give me a second. I'm gonna blow my nose. All right. All right. Part 2, A Killing Wind. Chapter 5, Jesper. Jesper felt like his clothes were crawling with fleas. Whenever the crew left Blackveil Island to skulk around the barrel, they wore the costumes of the comedy brute. The capes, veils, masks, and occasionally horns that tourists and locals alike used to disguise their identities while enjoying the pleasures of the barrel. But here, on the respectable avenues and canals of the University District, Mr. Crimson and the Grey Imp would have drawn a lot of stares. So he and Wyland had ditched their costumes as soon as they were clear of the staves. And if Jasper was honest with himself, he didn't want to meet his father for the first time in years dressed in a goggle-eyed mask or an orange silk cape, or even his usual barrel flash. He dressed as respectable. He dressed as respectably as he could. Wyland had lent him a few kruga for a second-hand tweed jacket and a gloomy gray waistcoat. Desperate didn't look precisely reputable, but students weren't supposed to look too prosperous anyway. Once again, he found himself reaching for his revolvers, longing for the cool, familiar feel of their pearl handles beneath his thumbs. That skiff of a lawyer had ordered the floor boss to store them in a safe at the Cumulus. Kaz said they'd get them back in good time, but he doubted Kaz would be so calm and collected if someone had swiped his cane. You're the one who put them on the table like a nub, Jesper reminded himself. He'd done it for an edge, and if he was honest, he'd done it for Kaz too, to show he was willing to do what it took to make things right, not that it seemed to matter much. Well, he consoled himself, it's not like I could have worn my revolvers on this errand anyways. Students and professors didn't go from class to class packing powder. Might make for a more interesting school day if they did. Even so, Jesper had hidden a sad lump of a pistol beneath his coat. This was Ketterdam, after all, and it was possible he and Wyland were walking into a trap. That was why Kaz and Matthias were shadowing their steps. He'd seen no sign of either of them, and Jesper supposed that was a good thing. But he was still grateful Wyland had offered to come along. Kaz had only allowed it because Wyland said he needed supplies for his work on the Weevil. They walked past student cafes and booksellers, shop windows crammed with textbooks, ink, and paper. They were less than 2 miles from the noise and the clatter of the barrel, but it felt like they'd crossed a bridge into another country. Instead of packs and sailors fresh off the boats, looking for trouble, or tourists jostling into you from every angle, people stepped aside to let you pass, kept their conversations low. No barkers shouted from the storefronts, hoping to garner business. The crooked little alleys were full of bookbinders and apothecaries, and the corners were free of the girls and boys who lacked an association with one of the West Stave houses and who had been forced to ply their trade on the street. Jesper paused below an awning and took a deep breath through his nose. What? Asked Wyland. It smells so much better here. Expensive tobacco, morning rain still damp on the cobblestones, blue clouds of hyacinths in the windows boxes. No urine, no vomit, no cheap perfume or garbage rot. Even the tang of coal smoke seemed fainter. Are you stalling? Wyland asked. No, Jesper exhaled and sagged a bit. Maybe a little. Roddy had taken a message to the hotel where the man claimed to be Jesper's father was staying, so they could set a time and place to meet. Jesper wanted to go himself, but if his father really was in Ketterdam, it was possible he was being used as bait. Better to meet in broad daylight on neutral ground. The university had seemed safest, far away from the dangers of the barrel or any of Jesper's usual stomping grounds. Jesper didn't know if he wanted his father to be waiting for him at the university or not. It was so much more pleasant to think of facing a fight than the shame of how horribly he'd botched everything. But talking about that felt like trying to climb a scaffold made of rotting boards. So he said, I always liked this part of town. My father likes it too. He places a high value on learning. Higher than money? Wyland shrugged, eyeing a window full of hand painted globes. Knowledge isn't a sign of divine favor. Prosperity is. Jesper cast him a swift glance. He still wasn't used to Wyland's voice coming out of Kuei's mouth. It always left him feeling a little off kilter, like he thought he was reaching for a cup of wine and gotten a mouthful of water instead. Is your papa really that religious, or is that just an excuse for being a man's? Is your papa really that religious, or is that just an excuse for being a mean son of a bitch when it comes to business? When it comes to anything, really. Particularly thugs and canal rats from the barrel. Ryland shifted the strap of his satchel. He thinks the barrel distracts men from work and industry and leads to degeneracy. He may have a point, said Jesper. He sometimes wondered what might have happened if he'd never gone out with his new friends that night. If he'd never walked into the gambling parlor and taken that first spin of Macker's wheel. It was meant to be harmless fun, and for everyone else it had been, but Jesper's life had split like a log in two distinct and uneven pieces. The time before he'd stepped up to that wheel, and every day since. The barrel eats people. Maybe, Wyland considered, but business is business. The gambling parlors and brothels meet a demand. They offer employment. They pay taxes. What a good little barrel boy you've become. That's practically a page out of the boss's books. Every few years, some reformer got it into his head to clean up the barrel and purge Ketterdam of its unsavory reputation. That was when the pamphlets came out, a war of propaganda between the owners of the gambling den and pleasure houses on one side, and the black suited merch reformers on the other side. In the end, it all came down to money. The business of East and West Stave turned a serious profit, and the denizens of the barrel dumped every righteous coin into the city's tax coffers. Wyland tugged on the satchel strap again. It had gone twisted at the top. I don't think it's much different from wagering your fortune on a shipment of silk or dirta. Your odds are just a lot better when you're playing when you're playing the market. You have my attention, Merchling, but our odds were always of interest. What's the most your father ever lost in a trade? I don't really know. He stopped talking about those things with me a long time ago. Jesper hated. Jesper hesitated. Jan van Eck was three kinds of fool for the way he treated his son, but Jesper could admit he was curious about Wyland's supposed affliction. He wanted to know what Wyland saw when he tried to read, why he seemed fine with equations or prices on a menu, but not sentences or signs. Instead, he said, I wonder if proximity to the barrel makes merchants more uptight. All that black clothing and restraint, meat only twice a week, lager instead of brandy. Maybe they're making up for all the fun we're having. Keeping the scales balanced? Sure, I mean, just think of the heights of the debauchery we could reach if no one kept the city in check. Champagne for breakfast, naked orgies on the floor of the exchange. Made a flustered noise that sounded like a bird with a cough and looked anywhere but at Jesper. He was so wonderfully easy to rattle, though Jesper could admit he didn't think the university district needed a dose of the dirty. He liked it just fine as it was, clean and quiet and smelling of books and flowers. You don't have to come, Jesper said, because he felt he should. You have your supplies. You could wait this out safe and snug in the coffee house. Is that what you want? No, I can't do this alone, Jesper shrugged. He wasn't sure how he felt about what Wylan might witness at the university. Jesper had rarely seen his father angry, but how could he fail to be angry now? What explanations could Jesper offer him? He'd lied, put the livelihood of his father put the livelihood his father had worked so hard for into jeopardy. And for what? A steaming pile of nothing. But Jesper couldn't bear the thought of facing his father on his own. And Neige would have understood. Not that he deserved her sympathy, but there was something steady in her that he knew would recognize and ease his own fears. He'd hoped that Kaz would offer to accompany him, but when they'd split up to approach the university, Kaz had spared him only one dark glance. The message had been clear. You dug this grave. Go lie in it. Kaz was still punishing him for the ambush that had nearly ended the ice court job before it began, and it was going to take more than Jesper sacrificing his revolvers for him to earn his way back into Kaz's good graces. Did Kaz even have good graces? Jesper's heart beat a little harder as they walked beneath the vast stone archway in the courtyard of the Book Spleen. The university wasn't one building but a series of them, all built around parallel sections of the Bow Canal and, and joined by a speaker's bridge, where people met to debate on or drink a friendly pint of lager, depending on the day of the week. But the Boak Spleen was the heart of this university. Four libraries built around the central courtyard and the Scholars' Fountain. It had been nearly 2 years since Jesper had set foot on university grounds. He'd never officially withdrawn from school. He hadn't even really decided not to attend. He'd simply started spending more and more time on his stave until he looked up one day and realized the barrel had become his home. Even so, in his brief time as a student, he'd fallen in love with the book Spleen. Jesper had never been a great reader. He loved stories, but he hated sitting still, and the books assigned to him from school seemed designed to make his mind wander. At the book spleen, wherever his eyes strayed, there was something to occupy them. Leaded windows with stained glass borders, iron gates worked into figures of books and ships, the central fountain with its bearded scholar, and best of all, the gargoyles, bat-winged grotesques in mortarboard caps, and stone dragons falling asleep over the books. He liked to think that whoever had built this place had known not all students were suited to quiet contemplation. But as they entered the courtyard, Jesper didn't look around to savor the stonework or listen to the splash of the fountain. All his attention focused on the man standing near the eastern wall, gazing up at the stained glass windows, a crumpled hat clasped in his hands. With a pang, Jesper realized his father had worn his best suit. He'd combed his Kalish red hair tidily back from his brow. They were gray in it. There was gray in it now that hadn't been there when Jesper had left home. Colm Fahey looked like a farmer on his way to church. Totally out of place. Kaz, hell, anyone in the barrel would take one look at him and just see a walking, talking target. Jesper's throat felt dry, sand parched. "Dah," he croaked. His father's head snapped up, and Jesper steeled himself for what might come next. Whatever insults or outrage his father hurled at him, he deserved. But he wasn't prepared for the relieved grin that split his father's craggy features. Someone might as well have put a bullet right in Jesper's heart. "Jess!" his father cried, and then Jesper was crossing the courtyard, and his father's arms were tight around him, hugging him so hard Jesper thought he'd actually felt his ribs bend. "All saints, I thought you were dead. They said you weren't a student here anymore, that you'd just vanished, and I was sure you'd been stuck through by bandits or the like in this saints forsaken place. I'm alive, da, Jesper gasped, but if you keep squeezing me like that, I won't be for long." His father laughed and released him, holding him at arm's length, big hands on Jesper's shoulders. "I swear you're a foot taller." Jesper ducked his head. "Half a foot. This is Wylan," he said, switching from Zemeni to Kirch. They'd spoken both at home, his mother's language and the language of trade. His father's native Kalish had been reserved for the rare times Colm sang. "Nice to meet you. Do you speak Kirch?" his father practically shouted, and Jesper realized it was because Wylan still looked shoe. "Dah," he said, cringing in embarrassment. "He speaks Kirch just fine." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Fahey," said Wylan. Bless his merch manners. And you too, lad. Are you a student as well? I have studied, said Wyland awkwardly. Jesper had no idea how to fill the silence that followed. He wasn't sure what he'd expected from this meeting with his father, but a friendly exchange of pleasantries wasn't it. Wyland cleared his throat. Are you hungry, Mr. Fahey? Starving, Jesper's father replied gratefully. Wyland gave Jesper a poke with his elbow. Maybe we could take your father to lunch. Lunch, Jesper said, repeating the word as if he'd just learned it. Yes, lunch. Why? Who doesn't like lunch? Lunch felt like a miracle. They'd eat, they'd talk, maybe they'd drink. Please let them drink. But Jesper, what has been happening? I received a notice from Gemmen's bank. The loan is coming due, and you'd given me to believe it was temporary. And your studies, Jesper began. The thing is, a shot rang out against the walls of the courtyard. Jesper shoved his father behind him as a bullet pinged off the stones of their street, setting up a cloud of dust. Suddenly, gunfire was echoing across the courtyard, and reverberation made it hard to tell where the shots were coming from. What in the name of all that is holy? Jesper yanked down his father's sleeve, pulling him toward the hooded stone shelter of a doorway. He looked to his left, prepared to grab hold of Wyland, but the merchantling was already in motion, keeping pace ben- keeping pace beside Jesper in what passed for a reasonable crouch. Nothing like being shot at a few times to make you a fast learner. Jesper thought as they reached the protective curve of the overhang. He craned his neck to try to see up the roofline, then flinched back as more shots rang out. Another smattering of gunfire rattled from somewhere above and to the left of them, and Jesper could only hope that Matthias and Kaz were returning fire. Saints, his father gasped. This city is worse than the guidebook said. It isn't the city, Jesper said, pulling the pistol from his coat. They're after me, or after us. Hard to say. Who's after you? Jesper exchanged a glance with Wyland. Jan van Eck, a rival gang looking to settle a score, Pekka Rollins, or someone else Jesper had borrowed money from. There's a long list of potential suitors. We need to get out of here before they introduce themselves more personally. Brigands? Jesper knew there was a good chance he was about to be riddled with holes, so he tried to restrain his grin. Something like that. He peered around the edge of the door, peeled off two shots, then ducked back when another spate of gunfire exploded. Wyland, tell me you're packing more than pens, ink, and weevil makings. I've got two flash bombs and something new I rigged up with a little more, wallop. Bombs? Jesper father asked, blinking as if to wake himself from a bad dream. Jesper shrugged helplessly. Think of them as science experiments? Think of them as science experiments? What kind of numbers are we up against? Asked Wyland. Look at you, asking all the right questions. Hard to tell. They're somewhere on the roof, and the only way out is back through the archway. There's a lot of courtyard across with them firing from high ground. Even if we make it, I'm guessing they're going to have plenty more thunder waiting for us outside the boat spleen, unless Kazamatias can somehow clear a path. I know another way out, said Wyland, but the entrance is on the other side of the courtyard. He pointed to a door beneath an arch carved with some kind of horned monster gnawing on a pencil. The reading room? Jesper gouged the distance. All right, on three. You make a break. I'll cover you. Get my father inside. Jesper, I swear I'll explain everything, but right now, all you need to know is that we're in a bad situation, and bad situations happen to be my area of expertise. And it was true. Jesper could feel himself coming alive, the worry that had been dogging his steps since he'd gotten news of his father's arrival in Ketterdam falling away. He felt free, dangerous, like lightning rolling over the prairie. Trust me, Da. All right, boy, all right. Jesper was pretty sure he could hear an unspoken for now. He saw Wyland brace himself. The merchling was still so new to all this. Hopefully, Jesper wouldn't get everyone killed. One, two, he started firing on three. Leaping into the courtyard, he rolled for cover behind the fountains. He'd gone in blind, but he picked out the shapes on the roof quickly, aiming by instinct, sensing movement and firing before he could think his way clear of a good shot. He didn't need to kill anyone. He just needed to scare the hell out of them and buy Wyland and his father time.
Take that, depression!
A bullet struck A bullet struck the fountain's central statue, the book in the scholar's hands exploding in fragments of stone. Whatever ammunition they were using, they weren't messing around. Jesper reloaded and popped up from behind the fountain, shooting. All saints, he shouted as pain tore through his shoulder. He really hated being shot. He shrank back behind the stone lip. He flexed his hand, testing the damage to his arm. Just a scratch, but it hurt like hell, and he was bleeding all over his new tweed jacket. This is why it doesn't pay to try to look respectable, he muttered. Above him, he could see the silhouette of the roof moving. Any minute, they were going to circle around the other side of the fountain and he'd be done for. Jesper, Wyland's voice. Damn it! He was supposed to get clear. Jesper, at your 2 o'clock. Looked up and aimed. Jesper looked up and something was arcing through the sky. Without thinking, he aimed and fired. The air exploded. Get in the water, Wyland shouted. Jesper dove into the fountain, and a second later, the air sizzled with light. When Jesper poked his soaked head out of the water, he saw that every exposed surface of the courtyard and its garden was pocked with holes, tendrils of smoke rising from the tiny craters. Whoever was up on the roof was screaming. Just what kind of bomb had Wyland let loose? He hoped Matthias and Kaz had found cover, but there was no time to stew on it. He bolted for the doorway beneath a pencil-chewing demon. Wyland and his father were waiting inside. They slammed the door shut. "Help me," said Jesper. "We need to barricade the Help me," said Jesper. "We need to barricade the entrance." The man behind the desk wore gray scholar robes. His nostrils were flared so wide in effrontery that Jesper feared being sucked up one of them. "Young man," Jesper pointed his gun at the scholar's chest. "Move." "Jesper," his father said. "Don't worry, Da. People point guns at each other all the time in Ketterdam. It's basically a handshake." "Is that true?" his father asked as the scholar grudgingly moved aside and they shoved the heavy desk in front of the door. "Absolutely," said Whiteland. "Absolutely," said Wyland. "Certainly not," said the scholar. Jesper waved them on. "Depends on the neighborhood. Let's go." They pelted down the main aisle of the reading room between long tables lit by lamps with curving necks. Students huddled against the wall and under their chairs, probably thinking they were all about to die. "Nothing to worry about, everyone," Jesper called. "Just a little target practice in the courtyard." "This way," said Wyland, ushering them through the door covered in elaborate scrollwork. "Oh, you mustn't," the scholar said, rushing after them, robes flapping. "Not the rare books room." "Do you want to shake hands again?" Jesper asked, then added, "I promise we won't shoot anything we don't have to." He gave his father a gentle shove up the stairs. "Jesper," said a voice from behind the nearest table. A pretty blonde girl looked up from where she was crouched on the floor. "Madeline?" Jesper asked. "Madeline Michaud? You said we'd have breakfast. I had to go to Fjerda." "Fjerda?" Jesper headed up the stairs after Wyland, then poked his head back into the reading room. "If I live, I'll buy you waffles." "You don't have enough money to buy her waffles," Wyland grumbled. "Be quiet, we're in a library." Jesper never had cause to enter the rare books room while he was at school. The silence was so deep it was like being underwater. Illuminated manuscripts were displayed in glass cases lit by golden falls of lamplight, and rare maps covered the wall. A squaller in a blue kefta stood in the corner, arms raised, but shrank back as they entered. "Shoo!" the squaller cried when he saw Wyland. "I won't go with you. I'll kill myself first." Just Jesper Jesper's father held up his hand as if gentling a horse. "Easy, lad. We're just passing through," said Jesper, giving his father another push. "Follow me," said Wyland. "What is the squaller doing in the rare books room?" Jesper asked as they raced through the labyrinth of shelves and cases, past the occasional scholar or student crouching against the books in fear. "Humidity. He keeps the air dry to preserve the manuscripts. Nice work if you can get it." When they reached the westernmost wall, Wyland stopped in front of a map of Ravka. He looked around to make sure they weren't being observed, then pressed the symbol marking the capital, Os Alta. The country seemed to be tear apart along the seam of the unsea, revealing a dark gap barely wide enough to squeeze through. "It leads to the second floor of the printmaker's shop," said Wyland as they edged inside. "It was built as a way for professors to get from the library to their homes without having to deal with angry students." "Angry," Jesper's father said. "Do all the students have guns?" "No, but there's the long-standing tradition of rioting over grades." The map slid closed, leaving them in the dark as they shuffled along sideways. "Not to be a podge," Jesper murmured to Wyland, "but I wouldn't have thought you'd know your way around the rare books room. I used to meet with one of my tutors here, back when my father still thought." The tutor had a lot of interesting story, and I always liked the maps. Tracing the letters sometimes made it easier to. It's how I found the passage. "You know, Wyland, one of these days I'm going to stop underestimating you." There was a brief pause then, and from somewhere up ahead he heard Wyland say, "Then you're going to be a lot harder to surprise." Jesper grinned, but it didn't quite feel right. From behind them, he could hear shouting from the rare books room. It had been a close call. He was bleeding from his shoulder. They had made a grand escape. These were the moments he lived for. He should be buzzing from the excitement of the fight. The thrill was still there, fizzing through his blood, but beside it was a cold, unfamiliar sensation that felt like it was draining the joy from him. All he could think was, Doc could have been hurt. He could have died. Jesper was used to people shooting at him. He would have been a little insulted if they'd stopped shooting at him. This was different. His father hadn't chosen this fight. His only crime had been putting his faith in his son. "That's the problem with Ketterdam," Jesper thought as they stumbled uncertainly through the dark. "Trusting the wrong person can get you killed." "Good night. I'm crashing, so rest well and good luck tomorrow." "Aw, good night, Eli." "I'm glad you're getting some sleep, teddy bear." I honestly, I'm thinking about calling it here as well. My vertigo hasn't gotten worse, but I'm getting tired. Um, and I should probably end early anyways. And you know what? I know who we're gonna raid because we haven't raided him in a while. So everyone copy the rate messages. I'm sorry we couldn't go on longer, but my vertigo is sort of starting to act up, and it's yeah. We'll have to continue reading this a different day. Um, I want to say maybe Wednesday night. I don't know. Cause Tuesday I should be with Gabe again. I think we're doing more of the reading, the Danganronpa reading. Unless I don't know, unless I'm feeling bad that day as well, then I'll call it off with him. But I'm pretty sure I'll probably be there. Otherwise, and then on Thursday I have plans with Juvie again to continue Split Fiction. Although it will still be on my computer, so I probably won't be streaming it. We'll see. It will probably be on her channel, but yeah. So maybe Wednesday or Friday night I'll get the chance to read again. If not Saturday. But yeah. Um sorry. Sorry, Starlings. I know I've been kind of absent, but it's been trying to keep to like, join my buddies. But yeah. All right. Let us. All right, Starlings. We are going to go join our favorite wolf cuz he hasn't been live for a hot minute. So it seems only fair that we finally go see him. Um yeah. Even though I know Yoshi, Exo, Buddha, and Glory Spider are all live. I'm like, oh, but Trouble hasn't been live in so long that I'm like, we should go join him. So yeah, copy the rain messages, please, Starlings. And let's go join the wolf pack. But yeah, thank you for keeping me company tonight. I'm sorry that I had to cut it short, but my health is starting to give me issues, so it's probably I have to call an early night probably anyways. So yeah. Bye, everyone. We'll continue, like I said, maybe Wednesday or Friday, if not Saturday. Um, I'm gonna try to find time to stream on my own, cause I have been missing this time with you guys, but it's not always easy, when I'm trying to like keep up with social stuff. So yeah. But I love y'all. Let's go join this. Let's go join the wolf pack. Mwah! I love y'all. Bye.